Welcome to the Tank Museum and to TANKFEST 2024. My name's Nick and I've been a member of the Tank Museum team for almost 20 years.
And I'm Richard, I'm the head of the military relations team for World of Tanks and also a former tankie with the Royal Tank Regiment.
And I'm David Baggely, or Ikibu as many of you know me by. I'm the head of community for World of Tanks PC West, and here today we're at TANKFEST.
So, TANKFEST, Nick. Big explanation, what is TANKFEST?
Well, it's a big tank festival. It's kind of like Glastonbury, but we're not going to inflict Coldplay on anyone. Now, it's the world's finest display of historic moving armour, but it's not just about tanks. We've got traders' stores, we've got living history, we've got guest armour, and of course we've got the British Army as well. And it's our biggest fundraising event of the year, which involves every member of the Tank Museum team and a number of volunteers as well.
So please settle in, put the kettle on, make sure you're comfy, and we're going to have lots to bring you in the next 3 hours. Got loads of tanks action, of course. We're going to go live into the arena. We're going to have a look at some of the reenactments. We've got some videos where we're going behind the scenes to see what it actually takes to bring on this mega display at TANKFEST. And we're going to finish off the show with the British Army and a look at a brand new vehicle of theirs. And of course, Nick, the highlight for everybody will be the unveiling and the driving of the monstrosity that is the FV 4005 Stage 2.
We're all, of course, looking forward to that. But as you may know, the Tank Museum is a registered charity and we couldn't exist if it wasn't for the support of people like you. So if you appreciate our free live stream and you'd like to show your support, please go to the Tank Museum's online shop, buy something from us. But you can also support us on Patreon, on YouTube members, on YouTube memberships. You could also leave us a gift in super thanks. And or you could just make a donation.
Thank you very much. Now, as you mentioned, it is a charitable organisation, so here we have, and I'm apologise for having to read all of this because we've got a couple of bundles all available right now in the premium store, of which the proceeds will, or some of the proceeds will, go to the Tank Museum, and those will start with the FV 4005 styles, and we've got things like the Tiger Mouse on sale as well as other vehicles like the Barask. As part of that, sorry, as you can see, it's a little windy and the rain is threatening to come, so my paper's flying everywhere. You can check out the World of Tanks website for some more details on all of those things. For instance, you can get the Sharpline style, you can get what the FV 4005 style is, the Thunderchild or the Galahad. As you saw in the beginning, we have the Battle Pass commanders from myself and Richard Cutland. They're available, so you should definitely check those out. We had a lot of fun recording those lines. And, of course, the big thing for everybody is that we are going to be having drops for those on Twitch. If you're not on there, you should definitely tune it out and join out the YouTube for the museum. And those Twitch will start with a 30 minutes with consumables for fire, the first aid kit, repair kit. After 60 minutes, you'll get the personal reserves. After 90 minutes, you'll have a chance of a 1-day premium, or 3 days of premium, a 2D style, or the 3D styles for the Udes, the Minotauro, or the Viperia premium tank. And yeah, this is where I'm reading my notes. And after 120 minutes, there's a chance of the 3D styles for the E100, the Grill, or the Barask premium tank, or the Shah MLE 75, or a 1-day premium, 7 days of premium, 360 days of premium, or the Panzerkampfwagen KW1. And that was an epic amount of promo there. I hope you will all join in supporting the museum. Up next, we're about to show you some cool footage that we captured earlier. Maybe? No? Okay. So, where's it coming? The footage is coming. There you go.
So I believe I'm right in saying this is the 21st TANKFEST, which is quite unbelievable. And Nick's been around for quite a long time. It's the 13th time that we now, as World of Tanks, has sponsored the event. So Nick, over the past few years, any particular highlights for you from TANKFEST?
Well, I think, for me, one of the most fascinating things about TANKFEST is just how much it's changed since that first event back in the year 2000. It was a single day. I think there were probably about 1,000 people there. And today, of course, as you know, it's 3 days. We have 25,000 people to entertain across the weekend. And in all those years, we have brought a number of fascinating vehicles to life for the TANKFEST audience. And I think we've got a little bit of VT which can show some of those highlights in previous years. Here you can see the French Saint-Chamond. I think I butchered that pronunciation.
Was 2017?
I believe it's 2017, yeah. That was brought over from Saumur, the French Tank Museum, my colleagues over in France. That's a very unique French First World War tank, and it was absolutely fascinating to see that one running. Onto another French tank, and this was a vehicle that you, as World of Tanks, sponsored to bring over from France. That's the Char B1.
We do. We love helping to bring some of these more unusual vehicles to TANKFEST, obviously. Really well received by the general public.
Absolutely, and we'd never had a Char B1 running in this country before, is my belief. And then going way back to the year 2008, which I believe this was the last time that the Vickers Medium tank actually ran in front of an audience. And again, Vickers Medium is a very unique vehicle. It's British interwar tank. I believe it was one of the first British tanks that had the rotating turret and almost kind of set the standard for what a modern tank might look like. Then going back to, when was this?
2018?
2018, all those years ago, before the pandemic. Seems like a long time ago now. The JS3 came over from the War Heritage Institute in Belgium. As you may know, they were hoping to be joining us this year with the JS3. It would have been great to see that near running with the FV 4005, but sadly a clutch problem has denied us that opportunity. And then 2019, again, World of Tanks sponsored this vehicle, the Panther.
Oh, fantastic. The Britannia Panther. Brilliant. Such a cool backstory. It was probably, I have to say, one of my favourite vehicles for quite a long time.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic to see that vehicle running again from our friends over in France. But of course, perhaps most significantly, 20 years ago this year at TANKFEST, Tiger 131 made its first public running appearance since the vehicle was captured. And I think it was Tiger 131's appearance in 2004 that really helped start to catapult TANKFEST into the event that we know and love today. But of course, since we've been working with World of Tanks, it's grown and grown and grown. And we're very grateful for your support, of course.
And I think this, the sheer number of breakdowns this year as well shows that the vulnerability of some of these vehicles as well. Never an easy job. And I think none of us can really underestimate how hard it is, not only to get them running, but of course to transport these things.
Absolutely. Yeah, we mentioned the JS3, its clutch failure sadly means that it can't be here today. We knew this a couple of weeks ago, but of course, you can't just drive down to Quick Fit and get your JS3 clutch repaired. There's an issue sometimes getting parts, of course, and it's very difficult to access certain parts in a tank. You might have to take the turret off to get at the engine, depending on the vehicle. So yeah, I think it's always something that we're very keen to make people aware of, is that starting up a tank isn't like getting into the drive, starting up your car and driving off. They don't always start first time, as well as a former tank man.
Of course, absolutely, and a huge shout out. I think it's a good time to shout out all the private collectors that take part in TANKFEST. I mean, without them it just wouldn't be the same. And of course your staff. I mean, we will have a look later on. We will go and visit the workshops to catch up with the fleet manager, but again, what an incredible job they do.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll go to the workshops. I mean, without the volunteers, there's no question we wouldn't be able to put on this event, so we're very grateful to them. Now, I've mentioned before that the Tank Museum is a registered charity, but for those who are new here, this VT we've got coming up will tell you everything about us that you need to know.
The Tank Museum, Bovington, UK. The home of the tank. The home of TANKFEST. And home to one of the finest collections of armour in the world. The Tank Museum tells the story of the tank and the people that served in them. There are 300 vehicles here, most of which are displayed inside the museum's large halls. In fascinating modern exhibitions, you'll come face to face with tanks that have seen action in every major conflict since the First World War. From the world's first tank to some of the latest, there is an extensive World War II collection and unique examples of the prototypes that didn't quite make the grade. With a workshop facility and an extensive archive and supporting collection, the Tank Museum is a centre of armoured excellence, sharing its passion with a global audience on its YouTube channel. As a not-for-profit organisation, our work is funded entirely by people like you. You can support us by backing our Patreon, buying something from our online store, joining our Friends scheme, or simply by making a donation using PayPal giving.
Now, of course, at the last TANKFest, we said a teary goodbye to Mr. Richard Smith, the former director of the Tank Museum.
That's right, Richard was director of the Tank Museum for 18 years, but now I've got a new boss, so please let me introduce to you all Mr. Chris Price.
Oh, it's very kind of you. What a fantastic day. It's been an honour to be here today. Thank you very much.
So this is your first TANKFest. How are you finding it so far?
First TANKFest. I have done big things before, but there's something really magical and special about this because it's just unique. There's nowhere else you can do it. I've done events before where you could go to other places and have a similar experience, but this is the first time we have such a unique show for people, and the atmosphere is fantastic.
So what's the background?
My background, my background is trains, unfortunately. The thing they're having very...
There's nothing unfortunate about trains.
Well, to most of the people watching, I should imagine it's unfortunate, but the real similarity is the fact that it's big, it's heavy, and it takes an awful lot of money to make sure it happens. And also, at the end of the day, I'm managing a wonderful team, and that has been common throughout my career. I've been very, very lucky, and nothing's changed in the Tank Museum. I've got a great group of people, and people like yourself to work with. Who could want more?
Most kind.
And obviously you've taken over the hot seat of the entire organisation. So, yeah, what are your first impressions? How have you found it?
I found it really, really exciting. You always get those first couple of months where you kind of, have I made the right decision? Am I the right person for this job, etc., etc. But that's settled down now, and I'm now in a period where I actually think, you know, it would be nice if somebody would stop introducing me as the new director of the Tank Museum. At some point, I'll know I've arrived when it becomes the director of the Tank Museum. That's when I've arrived. But no, fantastic. My first impressions are that it's got such a great future and it's got such a great team behind it.
And you actually started as an engineer in the RAF, am I right?
Yes, don't shout that very loudly around here, especially with the proximity of the army to us. No, being an ex-crab is a bit of a problem. This lot believe that all we ever did was take them from A to B. But no, I wasn't. My background's engineering, and it stayed engineering. And I think possibly that's one of the reasons that they want us to focus and look at what we're doing engineering-wise at the Tank Museum, and make sure we can invest in that and take that to another level. So projects such as FV4005 are not just one-offs. And
this morning, then, let's
wake up.
let's move on to this morning. I was actually admiring, you see at the moment, the tractor behind us. A new addition to the collection. So this morning, of course, TANKFest got underway, and what we're going to do now is actually do a catch-up with covering some of the vehicles from the First and the Second World War.
On the road at about 4 miles an hour. Off-road, it's about 2. So it's walking pace. But that's not a problem, because what it's doing here is moving in front of the infantry. The infantry are going to form up behind the tank and use it as a big metal shield, while the tank uses its armament to suppress the opposition. German army firing back with rifles and also with an MG08 machine gun. That is basically a Maxim design, pretty well much the same as the British Vickers gun in lots of ways. It's got a rate of fire 450 rounds a minute. It is not going to make much impact on that tank. It's deadly against infantry. It'll scythe you down. But tank armour, those rounds are going to bounce off. They did experiment with a type of armour-piercing round, the SMK, the Spitz mit Kern, but that's, again, the Mark IV. It's got better armour. It's not going to be that effective. Now, over on the other side, we're not the only people with tanks. There's a German A7V Sturmpanzerwagen moving in. And this is an extraordinary monster. Absolutely massive. 18-man crew. 5.7 Nordenfelt gun sticking out the front. And then an absolute panoply of machine guns. They were really not very good. The Germans didn't really believe in tanks. They only built about 20 of these things. And von Ludendorff expressed the opinion, well, they're probably no use, but we'll use them anyway. Its main problem, apart from the fact it's slow, is they were a bit unstable. If you get that onto rough ground, it's got a tendency to fall over. Not an ideal tank characteristic, if you think about it. A7V has stopped. I think that Mark IV is going to have to take care of the A7V. There was a duel between a Mark IV and 3 A7Vs, and there we go. There's a hit on the A7V. That armour is bulletproof, but it certainly won't stop a 6-pound shell. So the A7V is knocked out. That German machine gunner is still firing. More artillery.
It would have some anti-armour effect. They got a Ford car engine and gearbox in the back of it. They use components Vickers had already been using on other vehicles, some of their export vehicles, put it together quickly, and we make just about 140 of these that go into service in the end of the 1930s, and they're used at the beginning of the Second World War. Now this particular Matilda 1, that's we're lucky we've got the last 3 remaining Matilda 1s in the collection. One on display inside. This one was a range wreck. What you're listening to, by the way, in the back there is a Rover car engine. It was, when it was restored, it was all that was available at the time to get this as a runner. Radio is behind the driver, so the commander has to drop down inside the turret to operate the radio if one's fitted. Not all of them. We hadn't even got enough radios when it first goes into service. As they build the Matilda 1, they've already done drawings for a better tank. And that's going to be the next model of infantry tank. They knew, even the Matilda 1, even as they're starting to build it, they know this is a compromise. This is something so we can get going. And this tank coming on now is the tank they wanted to build more of, the Matilda 2, the second type of infantry tank that Britain uses. Now, if you look at the Matilda 2 story, it's kind of counterfactual to what we believe about British tanks. Oh, we were a bit slow off the mark, they weren't that good, etc., etc. Actually, this tank, the original designs put together by the Department of Tank Design at Woolwich, they find a company that's making locomotives called Vulcan up in the north of England. Vulcan are told to take the project forward, and from those initial drawings to the production of the very first Matilda 2 is 3 years. And that is lightning speed for building a tank at this sort of time. By the way, we're going to look at some of the British tanks of today this afternoon. You look at their gestation period. Sometimes we're looking at things that take decades. So that Matilda 2 was a real success story. It's got a 2-pounder gun, better than any of the anti-tank guns that are out there in the late 1930s and 1940s. The Germans have the 37mm, the 2-pounder, slightly larger, much more penetration than the German 37mm. The armour on the Matilda 2, 78mm thick. Again, we're going to see our Panzer III later on. When that goes into service, 5 centimetres of armour on the front there. So we're already, this is thicker armour for that infantry role. So it's actually a very successful design. And of course, this Matilda 2, the Matilda 1 there, when they actually are used in France, they really scare the Germans with their attack at Arras in May of 1940. The German 7th Panzer Division has advanced. 4th and 7th Royal Tank Regiment go into their flanks at Arras. Saw the one over in the far corner. So 1940, lessons learned from France. We're going to need a bigger gun. We said that. We're going to need more armour. So we start the next project. As soon as Matilda II is in service, 1939, we're looking at building the next generation of infantry tank. And this becomes the Churchill tank that you're seeing now. The very first couple of models of Churchill, when they're prototyped and sent to the troops, the manual actually says on page 1, we know we haven't got this right yet, but we really think you guys ought to start having these tanks, because again, we're still looking at emergency measures here. And that's the story. Hold that one in your head till we see the British Army vehicles this afternoon. Because ironically, the Churchill had a disastrous introduction to service. Loads of breakdowns, lots of things going wrong. But when those were ironed out, it had a cracking career in the Second World War. And of course, the Churchill is the basis for lots of that specialised armour. You can see our AVRI, Armoured Vehicle Royal Engineers, in the museum with that petard mortar on. Now this is a Mark III Churchill, so a very early one. The Mark I and II, they were trying to work out about armament, 2-pounder in the turret, or maybe put a howitzer, a 3-inch howitzer in the hull. By this one, late 42, yep, you can have that new 6-pounder. So this has now got the 6-pounder gun in the turret, thicker armour on the front, and a twin diesel in the back here powering this one along. Now, as an early Churchill, square doors on the side, that's a good giveaway. You're looking at an early Mark. If you look at the later Churchills, they have round doors on. And this has now got a welded together turret. Again, one of these issues we're facing in Britain. Lots of the prime factory space and technicians are taking up with quite sensibly looking after the RAF, defend ourselves with Spitfires and Hurricanes, and then build bombers to get back at.
It was superseded largely by its bigger brother, the Mark IV, but the chassis continued in use throughout World War II, became the basis of the very successful Stug 3, the Sturmgeschütz 3 assault gun. And in fact, the Stug 3 was the most successful killer of Allied tanks in World War II. So it's very tempting to look at the big King Tigers and what have you. There's a derivative of that vehicle there, which destroyed most Allied armour in World War II. Now in 1941, of course, something else happened. The Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, the Americans came into the war. But even before that, the Americans had agreed, Roosevelt had agreed to supply armour to Britain. And this is the first American tank that was supplied to us. The first American-built tank to see combat in July of 1941. This is the M3A1 Stuart. Now in the years before World War II, America basically had virtually no tanks at all. There was literally, quite literally a handful of tanks. A few, what the Americans like to call combat cars, we'd call them armoured cars, and a few very light tanks like the M2. When the war started, particularly when the Germans were so successful in France, the French army was rolled up by tanks like this Panzer III, the Americans very quickly tried to beef up their tank production. And again, you'll remember David was saying that it's not easy to produce tanks when you're not used to doing it. The Americans had no intention of fighting either the Mexicans or the Canadians anytime soon, so they had no real experience in producing tanks. This is an upgrade of the existing light tanks. It's worth saying it's called a Stuart because famously Winston Churchill found it difficult to cope with the alphanumeric designation that the Americans gave their vehicles. That's an M3A1. You're going to see another M3A1 come on in a moment, which is entirely different. Churchill said, look, for goodness sake, why don't they just give them names? So he tended to name American tanks after American generals. This is named after Jeb Stuart, the Confederate general. The tank that the Americans really wanted to build, which they were struggling to get off the tracks, was going to be named after General Sherman. But that wasn't ready yet. This was the tank that went to the Western Desert initially, and to the 8th Army, she was always known as the Honey. High explosive, and it can actually engage German anti-tank guns at a distance, so that was a huge advantage for the soldiers fighting in the Western Desert where this was first deployed. Most tanks are destroyed by anti-tank guns rather than other tanks. It's important to be able to engage other tanks, but you also need to be able to fire high explosive. And the curse really of the British 2-pounder was it tended to fire only solid shot. So you can see there, that big old 75mm. This is sometimes called the tank that shocked Rommel. Rommel didn't like these because it allowed the British to engage his screens of anti-tank guns. He had this tendency to lay out a screen of anti-tank guns to entice the British towards it and then to knock them out before they came into range. This could engage the anti-tank guns. Now I'm going to hand over now to my colleague David, because he's got the big medium, the M4 Sherman.
So what we're looking at with this amazing shot-up M3, and now the next generation of tank, that one that the Americans actually wanted, was a fully turreted tank with, at the beginning, a 75mm gun, so same caliber as in the Sponson there, but let's get it in that fully rotating turret. We get that with the Sherman. Now, those of you tank fans here, you'll hear the arguments, was the Sherman terrible, a Tommy Cooker, etc., or was it probably the best thing since sliced bread in World War II? The fact America could make, going from pretty much a standing start with components they tested, about, we think, 300 odd tanks made in America up to about 1939, and then by the end of the war we're coming on for about 90,000 vehicles made in that short space of time. So the design again of the Sherman, components used from the Grant and the Lee, you're looking at suspension systems that have been tried and tested. They've got the radial R975 engine. That's what they want. But just like I said about the engines in Britain, actually, even in America, they can't make enough of the same engine, so they end up having 4 different engine types in Sherman tanks in World War II. And if you're really nerdy, that's the reason why. M4A1, that's a cast-held version, but M4A2, as we're looking at behind us, M4's basically radial engine, M4A2 has the twin diesel, etc., etc. So all these little modifications and marks firstly relates to the engine. If after that it then has brackets 76, that means 76mm gun. This one, the bigger gun that was put on later in the war. If it then says HVSS after that list of all the things, HVSS, this newer type of suspension we've got on this Sherman, starts being seen in the field about December 1944. So again, the success of the Sherman and its predecessor, the M3 Grant, you're using common components to help improve or add to your vehicle during its production run. So it's quite often you see a lot of Shermans, very hard to find two the same. Now obviously many of you will recognise this particular Sherman that belongs to the Tank Museum. This M4A2, it was done up to look like a American Sherman being used. Most of this model actually were given to the Soviet Union in World War II. The Soviet Union, it was given trucks, huge amounts of material, Valentine tanks from Britain, all part of that support to the Soviet Union. They became part of Lend-Lease, so American equipment going over on basically peppercorn rates, as it were, agreed by Roosevelt. The only issue was, of course, this was capitalist equipment, so all the photos tended to be edited out after the war. Very hard finding pictures of these Shermans once, just like this, helped liberate Berlin. I say the word liberate, but help capture Berlin in 1945. Ours, we've left it in the paint scheme and with the accoutrements that it was put on it for when it was in the Fury movie. This is actually the hero tank of that film. And as you can see, we've got Brad Pitt again back up in the turret today.
I mean, that's what TANKFEST is all about, isn't it? Where else in the world can you see such a fantastic array of World War II armour?
And I would have to say that I thought the question was going to be, you know, any favourites and all that. I was thinking as we were watching that show this morning that, for me, when you see the history of it as well presented as that as well with the vehicles. I mean, I can't help thinking, of course, Royal Tank Regiment, Heavy Branch Machine Gun Corps, the First World War tanks, you know, how the advancement's been incredible, hasn't it? Just up to the Second World War, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. From the Mark IV, I think we go all the way up to the Comet in that particular display. And yeah, I mean, like I say, I mean, for the crewman's experience, how different it would have been from the First World War to the Second World War.
I've always found it fascinating and read anything I could about certainly the first, you know, the Mark IV and the first tanks and how it's, you know, the experiences are so similar, even with today's, you know, modern main battle tanks and everything. The experience you go through on a tank, other than the technology side of it, is very, very similar.
Yeah. And so, did you have any particular favourites from the vehicles that we've seen there?
I would say safely that I've not really got any. I love a Churchill on the best of days anyway, so everybody loves a Churchill. Yeah. But the Swiss cheese tank is very fascinating.
The Swiss cheese tank. So the Swiss cheese tank is, of course, the M3 Grant, which is very unusual because, of course, that's a vehicle that was it was found on a rage wreck and it's been restored to running condition. But because the range wreck part of its history is an integral part of its story, the owners decided not to, if you like, get the polyfiller out and fill up the hole. So you see it as it was recovered.
And it's great, and it's hard to, even on the VT there, it's hard to, you have to really get up close to it to see. I mean, there are thousands of holes in that vehicle, so quite incredible.
And it's one of our guest vehicles, so we're very grateful to all of our guest owners who, Carl Brown, who particularly brought that vehicle. We're very grateful for all our guest owners helped make TANKFEST what it is. We don't have a running M3 Grant, so it's great to see one in the display. Also, some interesting vehicles from the Bannister collection as well. I always think it's great to see that Centaur, which is a bit like a Cromwell, but it's got a slightly different engine. Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, William Bannister, I mean, perfection is his middle name as far as I'm concerned. You have to see, I mean, to see inside those vehicles, every one of his collection is absolutely pristine. The attention to detail is sometimes quite breathtaking.
Absolutely, yeah. You won't appreciate the inside when you see it from the outside, but the outside, they look pretty immaculate, don't they? You can guarantee they look just as good inside. But the other thing I think we've seen, you know, as you were suggesting earlier, is that kind of real development of the tanks throughout the Second World War. You know, we started with the Matilda 1 there, a very, very small vehicle, relatively inexpensive. They were getting bigger and bigger and bigger towards the end of the war, obviously, as they were being developed to face the threats of bigger weapons and heavier armour, right?
Absolutely, and I suppose that's a very good lead into bigger weapons. It doesn't get a lot bigger, of course, than the star of our show, I think, the FV 4005 Stage 2.
Absolutely, yes. We're going to be seeing the FV 4005. It is a mouthful.
Especially when you put... Yeah.
We're going to be seeing that running in the display shortly. You may be aware that we have, with our partners World of Tanks and with the YouTuber and engineer Joe Hughes, formed a partnership to get the FV 4005 back into running order. And the VT that we've got coming up now tells the story of that restoration so far.
World of Tanks players will know the unusual FV 4005 Stage 2 for being great fun to play. Its supporters describe it as a meme tank, nicknaming it the shit bomb for its boxy appearance, and celebrating its ability to fire a Hesh round capable of delivering one almighty slam. Its detractors warn that it's slow, as the armour of a dustbin lacks accuracy, and its large size makes it visible from the other side of the map. But not all players realise that the FV 4005 Stage 2 is real, and it exists here at the Tank Museum. Today at TANKFEST you'll be amongst the first to see this incredible vehicle moving again, since the concept was abandoned in the 1950s. And it's all thanks to a partnership between World of Tanks and its players, the Tank Museum and their supporters, and engineering YouTuber Mr. Joe Hughes. Joe has been a fan of the FV 4005 and World of Tanks before discovering that the turret had survived in the Tank Museum, where, for many years since its arrival in the 1970s, it has been a feature of the museum car park. Whilst it had later been united with the Centurion tank and displayed as a gate guard, Joe wanted to go one further and approached the Tank Museum's head of collection with a proposal.
Joe contacted me last year in January 2023. He wanted to have a look at the 405, he wanted to make a replica of it. And I remember asking why. So we met up, had a walk around it, and he presented me his plan to build a replica turret and put it on a Mark III hull. I called him back later that week. He said, why don't we work together? We loan you the hull, restore it, put it together, because we will never have the time and the resources to do it after all these years. This thing will be sitting on the gate, and we have so many other projects, and that's how it's sort of the start of the partnership.
Joe described his plan to reunite the unique turret with an accurate Centurion Mark III hull he had acquired, return the tank to running order, and display it at military vehicle events around the country.
Yes, in 2008, Harold Hamilton-Taylor, a World War II veteran and a volunteer at the time in the workshop, pointed out the significance of the 4005 turret when it was languishing in the yard here. And we hadn't done much research ourselves, and he really pointed it out, the significance of that turret.
Howard explained that in the 1950s, he had been part of a team who had taken part in experimental firing trials with the Centurion tank that had been adapted to carry the biggest possible gun. The experiment would be abandoned, and Harold moved on. But when he began visiting and working at the Tank Museum, he recognised the distinctive FV 4005 turret immediately. So in his honour, the decision was taken to save the turret from the car park, and it was mounted on an available Centurion hull, a Mark V, and FV 4005 has sat as a museum gate guard ever since. Now, anybody who's been up close to the FV 4005 will notice that the only inscription is the name, Spud. And what does that mean, Chris?
It's in honour of Harold, his army nickname. It was on the vehicle for all these years when it was a gate guard, and we've put it back on after the restoration. Joe asked me, do you want a name on it? Yeah, so put Spud back on it. Literally 2 weeks back, it went back on, so in his honour.
To fund the project, the Tank Museum needed to raise £40,000. When Chris told us about the project, we at World of Tanks were eager to get involved and pledged half the money. Then, the Tank Museum turned to its supporters to raise the remaining £20,000. You didn't disappoint. Within just a few hours, the £20,000 target was met.
We know our supporters love to get behind our vehicle projects, and it's because the Tank Museum has such a large collection of running vehicles. That's what makes TANKFEST so popular. But this vehicle, this isn't one of those hero vehicles. It's not a Sherman or a Churchill or a Tiger or something that played a big part in our history.
The FV 4005 was the result of an experiment to fit the biggest possible tank gun to a platform. The Conqueror wasn't ready, so the specifically built 183mm gun was fitted to a Centurion. The objective was to see how this specifically developed gun would perform against the threat of the more heavily armoured tanks emerging from the Soviet Union. Tanks, it was feared, would supersede the IS-3. The gun was a massive 183mm, designed to lob an approximately 70kg shell up to 2,000 yards, defeating armour 152mm thick, sloped at 60 degrees. But following tests, the concept was abandoned. The gun was far too powerful, proving to be just as dangerous to the vehicle and its occupants as it was to its intended target.
This tank was a dead end, and its lack of historical significance is why it ended up in the car park in the first place. But the fact that so many people know this tank even existed says something very interesting to us here at the Tank Museum. It's a great example of the positive power of video games in our culture, because people have played World of Tanks, including Joe Hughes. They know about these vehicles, and this video game in particular is allowing people to connect with and conserve our heritage in an entirely new way. There's a list of unusual one-off prototype vehicles that we have here at the Tank Museum that hardly anyone was interested in 12 years ago. But thanks to the World of Tanks tech trees, people come here looking for Tog-2, for Tortoise, for Black Prince, for Conway, and many others. And when people are interested, there is a greater will to help us preserve them.
Joe Hughes got to work on his Centurion hull straight away. There was plenty to do, but the whole thing needed to be stripped and almost every component overhauled. And back at the Tank Museum, the gun was removed from the turret, and the turret blasted to remove layers of paint. Years in the elements meant that the entire turret floor needed replacing, and other structural components needed reinforcing. Meanwhile, the Tank Museum had sent plans to have some of the features of the FV 4005 remade, such as the gun crutch and this, the ground anchor, which would have supported the tank when firing. Then, the turret was sent to Joe's workshop for the two to be reunited. Some last-minute tweaks, and the FV 4005 was finally ready for its journey to Dorset, where it is set to be the star of TANKFEST 2024. And it's all thanks to Joe Hughes, the Tank Museum and their supporters, and you, the players of World of Tanks, that we can enjoy the shit barn here at the Tank Museum. Okay. So we've finally caught up with Joe Hughes, and it's Joe, of course, collectively with the Tank Museum, that has managed to put the beast back on the road. Joe, how's it been? Any problems before you arrived at TANKFEST?
One small problem: it didn't start when it arrived on the lorry, but we soon rectified that. We were up till 1 o'clock in the morning. Float bowl had stuck in the car, but nothing you could help. It was just one of those things. But other than that, we're all good. Touch wood.
Now, was it close to the wire? No, because we saw each other, I don't know, a few weeks ago now.
It's very close.
And at that stage, I have to say, it didn't look anything like this.
We were painting it as we put it on the lorry.
Really?
Yeah, that's how close it was. And there's still a few things that we're going to do before it opens up. But yeah, it was cutting it close is an understatement. There were a lot of late nights towards the end.
And I have to say, Joe, it looks fantastic. I mean, we're seeing the video as well. Interior looks great. I have to say, I didn't expect it to look like that at all.
Yeah, it's turned out better than I thought, to be honest.
What would you say was the hardest part about it from a restoration perspective?
I would say sorting all the metalwork, like the track guards and the covers, the top, because we're trying to use, some bits have been replaced, some bits are new, and a lot of it's the original tin work, nothing lined up. The track guards were off different vehicles, so getting everything lined up and welded on, that was probably the hardest thing. Fitting the engine, the gearbox and the clutch, which sounds difficult, is fairly straightforward.
So driving, how does she drive?
Well, we had a few little teething problems. The tracks were jumping in a bit, so we've now took a link out of the tracks and we've adjusted the steering tillers up. Other than that, the gears, the engine, everything was pulling well, so we're hoping when we trial it again in a minute, she'll be spot on. So for first time, it was all right.
And what do you think of driving her?
It's really bizarre, because you're driving, you're looking through that, which is quite unusual. With the biggest gun you've ever seen, it's quite an unusual thing to be in, and it doesn't seem real that it's happening.
But with the turret on top as well, I mean, does that, I mean, obviously it affects the weight. Does it affect the way it handles?
It's actually a lot lighter than a normal Centurion, so it feels a lot faster than you would actually expect. So the engine feels a bit more lively, and yeah, you wouldn't really, other than the massive gun, you wouldn't know it was there when you're driving it.
Awesome. Well, best of luck, Joe. Fingers crossed everything goes well, and we can't wait to see her run around the arena.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Hello and welcome everybody back to the show. I have to say, I love the restoration of the FV. I know you were very excited and giddy about seeing it in real life.
Oh yeah, we are definitely huge fans. So Alexandra from Blitz is here on TANKFEST. Thanks for everyone who is watching the live stream on Twitch. You must have a good taste in games and tanks, of course. Enjoy the stream. And yeah, the main star of this TANKFEST is FV 4005. And you know, we have it in our game as well, in World of Tanks Blitz. So guys, let's make a huge spam on Twitch channel right now in the chat. Drop the plus sign if you have FV in your game. Do you have one?
We do have one. It's researchable, though I'm curious of what the nickname is that you had for it when Richard shared what ours is.
Yeah, our players name this FV a shit barn.
Yeah, it's the same here.
Or a hen house. Actually, we wanted to create something special for this TANKFEST, for this FV, and we have created the hen house legendary camo for this vehicle. It looks damn amazing, so check it out, jump in World of Blitz and get it absolutely for free.
And do you have any other activities going on in the game right now as part of TANKFEST?
Yeah, actually we are celebrating our birthday. Happy birthday to Blitz. Yeah, and of course we have created a lot of fun activities and for TANKFEST as well. So this skin is actually a good example of how we try to make Blitz a part of this amazing activity, TANKFEST. Yeah, so this hen house FV is a main star of our end of June. Sorry. So yeah, we are enjoying it very much. Actually, we also have the skin for Chieftain, realistic one. So yeah, I believe you'll also like it. Check it out.
Okay, thank you very much. And what was your favourite part of TANKFEST? 'Cause I think I saw you last year. I don't know if you've been here any more times.
Yeah, I've been. It's actually my third TANKFEST. We've started in 2018.
Okay.
Before COVID. You remember these old good times?
Yeah. I remember those times. And so what's your favourite tank of the collection?
After this TANKFEST, I believe that I should stick to FV.
Just sticking to the FV?
It just broke my heart because it looks in real life amazing, and I'm super happy that it has been restored and it's live on Arena, so it's amazing. It gives me goosebumps, and I believe all tank lovers would share these emotions with me.
Yep, that's correct. And of course, we love the FV just as much. We have those sales going on in World of Tanks PC that will have proceeds going towards the restoration and conservation and other efforts of the museum, like the FV 4005 restoration. Although I will say I'm hoping that Joe has to wear that hat somewhere around here. I was very jealous of his hat in that video. And so have you got any final words before we then move on to Fam the Tankman, who is going to quickly come into the scene by magic?
Yeah. So, guys, I want to see you next year on this same place at TANKFEST. So, actually, tickets are already on sale. You can get them right now and play games, play tanks, and see you next TANKFEST. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, and for those that are still tuning in and you are on Twitch, don't forget there are Twitch drops, and I'm going to have a massive mouthful going through those in a second. I do apologize in advance. So here you can see that after 30 minutes you will have some consumables, after 6 minutes you will have the personal reserves, after 90 minutes there will be either 1 day of premium, 3 days of premium, a 2D style with what's called the Dazzle camo. There's some 3D styles for those vehicles, as well as a chance of, after 120 minutes, there's a 1 day premium, 7 days of premium, 360 days of premium, some 3D styles as some premium vehicles, and you know, all you got to do is keep watching, follow the rules, follow the conditions, and claim it when you've got it. So here I am, joined by Fam, by Magic Movie Magic. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay, thank you. I mean, I'm hoping that the rain stays away and the wind calm down a little bit more. So we brought you in because I know that you have some amazing, special, unique prototype tanks that are in the museum.
We're definitely one of those museums where we have some of the most interesting, peculiar prototype vehicles, and most of them actually are in that building just over there. So yeah, we've got quite a few to offer, and that's what we're going to be talking about right now. So yeah.
Yep. So I know there's going to be a video asset coming up shortly, which is going to start with, and I'm hoping, is going to be the Black Prince. Now, can you give us a little bit of info about the Black Prince?
Well, when people look at the Black Prince, they normally initially think, oh wow, it looks so similar to the Churchill. That's funny enough because it was built by Vauxhall, the same company that made them.
Okay.
I always like to describe it as a Churchill on steroids. It's got a much, much bigger gun. It's using the very famous 17-pounder. And they put them in trials, but they were pretty slow. And as a result, they didn't go anywhere. Instead, the Centurion was developed instead. And, well, speaking of which, we've got a Centurion now. So, yeah, that is the Conway. The Conway essentially is the brother of the FV4005.
Yep.
Instead of that big 183mm gun, you're using 120. Same 120mm gun that goes on the Conqueror. So, yeah, but they didn't need it on the Centurion, so it went on the Conqueror. Yeah, we're just looking now at the Tortoise. That was designed for the German Siegfried line in the Second World War. So that's designed to take out heavy fortifications, heavy tanks as well. But yeah, there was only about 7 prototypes built, and we have one of them. Very lucky to have one. So
I always love the Tortoise because I've heard and I've seen footage of the reason it got its name was not only that it had shell, but it moved as fast as a Tortoise as well.
Yeah.
Amazing firepower, but yeah.
Yeah, bit slow. So yeah.
Okay, and which of those vehicles in particular, because I'm sure you have a favourite, which of those is your favourite?
I would definitely have to say FV4005. It's just such an insane concept. It's the biggest tank gun mounted on a track chassis, and 183mm. It's absolutely huge. That's matching the same caliber that you have on some on some destroyers, like some ships.
Yep.
And the fact that someone had the idea, yeah, let's put it on a tank and see what happens. When they trialed them, they literally, as they shot, they were so powerful, they were basically shaking themselves apart.
Yep.
Probably one of the reasons it didn't continue on into production, but no, it was basically just a test bed for FV215, which essentially was the Conqueror, but with the turret at the back and with a much bigger 183mm gun, which you also have in
we have it in the game.
So, yeah.
So we have all those vehicles in the game, which you can play, you can research and enjoy. Of course, one of my favourites that you can purchase or sometimes get through Twitch drops is the TOG. Now, can you share some info about the TOG?
TOG, the old gang, yes. Yeah. Probably one of the most famous meme tanks that we have here now.
Love it.
Hot TOG, all that. It's the heaviest tank in the museum. It weighs in at a whopping around 80 tons. To get it into the part of the museum that we have it, if I remember correctly, we had to use a lot of washing up liquid just to make the floor slippery enough because the tracks were seized. But yeah, it's incredibly long, uses a diesel electric engine, and yeah, who knows? You never know, we might even see it restored one day.
Please don't. I get this request so often, and I keep begging people, and it's like, maybe not, but you promised. You promised, so maybe one day.
It's on me.
Yeah. Now it's all on you. Maybe with enough of those sales that you've got that we're going from the styles, there's enough to go around. And so I know that you have a lot of other footage available and that you create with the museum and that you publish. So here's one of those videos. Please check them out. You have some amazing content, a lot of great knowledge. So
Thank you.
You should definitely check out more of Fan the Tank Man's content.
Cheers.
Thank you.
This is TOG 2, and it's both the longest and heaviest tank we have here at the Tank Museum. It was developed by Fosters of Lincoln and designed by the Special Vehicle Development Committee, made up of many of the original creators of the tank in World War I, or as they were originally called, landships. This is also where TOG got its name, as it stood for the Old Gang. TOG 2's design was more suited to a World War I battlefield, with trenches and barbed wire. And after the start of World War II, it was expected that the fighting would eventually turn to one of trenches, huge anti-tank ditches, and no man's land. But as the war went on, it would prove to be vastly different. TOG 2 weighs in at a whopping 80 tons and is just over 10 metres long, and a lot of this weight comes from the 600 horsepower electric diesel engine, the electric generators of which took up a lot of room, resulting in this tank being so long. TOG 2 successfully went through trials with positive results. Despite being long and heavy, it was actually quite capable and more manoeuvrable than you might expect. It was also very effective at tackling large trenches. It was, however, quite slow, having a top speed of only 8 miles per hour. The biggest issue with TOG 2 was its development time. It was built in 1941, but was only tested in 1943, and by this point it was completely outdated. There were already many other more capable tanks in service, such as the Churchill, and it was clear by now that there wasn't going to be a repeat of the kind of fighting that was seen in World War I. This is also the same year that the British Centurion started development, and overall it just didn't make any sense to put such a heavy, lumbering beast into production. But generations later, TOG 2 would receive a new wave of fame online when World of Tanks added it as a playable tank in their game. Players loved the fact that they could play as such a comically long tank, and ever since, TOG 2 has only got more and more popular with online audiences.
And welcome back once more to the TANKFEST Online stream. This time I'm joined by our console cousins, who is going to introduce herself as...
I am Kirsten Bailey, also known as KB, the community manager for Modern Armour.
Modern Armour. So it's on console. Can you give us a little bit of insight into what you've enjoyed about TANKFEST this year so far?
Well, of course we've loved seeing the FV 4005 restored. Mm-hmm. But I think everybody's enjoyed that. But we love the atmosphere, the people. The Tank Museum are brilliant to work with each year that we've been.
Yep.
And for a lot of my team, it's been seeing some of these tanks in person for the first time. We have quite a few tank fans on the team, and some of them have absolutely loved seeing things like the Tiger, the Challengers, and all the other weird and wonderful tanks in the collection.
So what's your favourite weird and wonderful tank?
TOG.
TOG?
Mine's the TOG.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Finally.
I love your little caption for the TOG.
Finally.
TOG is love, TOG is life.
TOG is life, yeah. And can you give us a bit of info of any activities you've got going on in the game right now?
Yes, so this week we've been running what we've dubbed a community challenge. Mm-hmm. So everybody works together, earning points. This time, as they're playing in the Tank Museum's collection of tanks, they will earn points towards the Tiger 131.
Okay. And I have to ask, what's the nickname of the FV in your player bases?
Do you really want me to say that?
Well, hopefully it's not too bad and get us banned, but go for it.
Well, I'm sure you know that most players do commonly refer to it as the ship barn.
Okay. Yeah. I still keep trying to convince people of the Peggy Portal of Doom, but they don't go for it, fortunately.
I can imagine, though, they wouldn't.
Yeah. They're not having any of it. That came from one of our content creators that was there. So, yeah, I mean, I know you've got a bunch of meet and greets going on with your team at the gaming zone as well, so you're having some fun, some giveaways,
yes.
We had the party. So, yeah. Do you think you'll be back next year?
I hope so. I love coming down here.
Okay, that's awesome. So I know that we've got a bit more activities coming later on the day. We're going to be heading towards Richard and Nick again, one more time. Is there anything you have a message for the player base, the community and the viewership going on right now?
That we enjoy being here. We love it. There is something special about being able to do this as the full franchise now. Mm-hmm. Because while we get to collaborate with all of you, we can see all of our cousins across the products, which we don't do that often.
No.
No. So it's lovely to come out and be together and work together.
Yep.
And, well, there's something very fun about seeing all of the tanks behind us.
Yeah, we also have a little bit of competition inside. The staff areas and everything else, competing who's clearly the best at certain vehicles and playing, which is, yeah, we need some 1v1s going on between certain teams, I think.
Okay, so I will challenge you to use some of our Cold War tanks just so that I can win.
Bring it. Bring it. I'm open to it. And then we can have a TOG 1v1 and see how that goes on there.
Probably badly on my side.
Oh, it's easy. You just hold down W and pray while you read chat.
W, you have to push the joystick.
Oh, yeah.
Console.
No,
you can't do keyboard.
You can put a keyboard in the console.
We can do mouse and keyboard, but I have always been a console gamer, so trying to use mouse and keyboard just doesn't work.
Okay. And are there funny activities coming up after TANKFEST?
Yes, so we've just announced some of our 4th of July activities.
Mm-hmm.
So we will be debuting the M26 Pershing T99, which is our second tank in World War II to use the rocket mechanic. And we have also debuted the XM1 that was made by GM in America. It was one of the prototypes for the M1 Abrams.
Okay, that's cool. And you like it, love it, or are you still staying with the TOG?
Still staying with the TOG.
Still staying with the TOG. Okay.
Don't get me wrong, the rockets are fun.
Yeah.
But TOG.
TOG. Always the TOG, yeah. I just want to see all of them driving forward. I would love to see it restored one day. Have you managed to see it often here? I know you took a selfie last year.
Yes. Every year I've been, so 3rd year now, I go across, I take a good look at the TOG, and I seem to have taken on your team's tradition of praying to the TOG each year.
At the beginning of every event, we pray and hope that nothing breaks or falls apart, so yeah.
And we've been doing well so far.
Why would you jinx it? Why would you? I'm looking for the rain clouds now. I can't. Okay.
It'll stay sunny. You'll be fine. We've already had the rain.
Double jinxed it. Why? So, thank you very much. I'll let you say some passing words to the viewership on there, and thank you for being an amazing guest before I then show the next video.
No, it's been lovely joining you.
Thank you very much.
Especially for first time on here.
Yep.
I hope everybody who couldn't make it down to TANKFEST is enjoying the live stream, and that they will support the Tank Museum in the future to help restore some more wonderful tanks.
Yeah, we're just staring at Nick as like, please make the talk happen.
Yes, please make the talk happen, because that would be absolutely amazing. So, I'm not sure it would fit on the track, though.
Now, thank you very much for Kirsten, or KB. Up next, we're going to show you some quick highlights from the D-Day stream we did earlier this month down in Portsmouth on the vehicle landing craft with the Churchill Crocodile as well as one of the Sherman vehicles.
Hello and welcome to this very special D-Day live stream brought to you from the deck of the only surviving D-Day landing craft tank 7074 here in Portsmouth at the D-Day story.
And the reason the D-Day story is here is because this area played such a big part in D-Day.
So this first gallery is all about preparations to D-Day. So it's starting at the point, why was D-Day necessary? How did the Allies put the plan together? So things like the choice between Normandy and Pas-de-Calais. So it's really early stages of the plan, like where do the Allies actually land?
So welcome to TANKFEST 2024. We're going to be going live to the events in the arena shortly. But before we do, Richard, obviously this year was the 80th anniversary of D-Day, and it looks like you had quite the road trip.
It did. We wanted to do something really to commemorate that event, you know, to pay homage to everybody in that landmark time in history. So we decided to do as much as we could in a very brief period of time. So we started off, obviously, with yourselves down here at the Tank Museum, and looked at, obviously, some of those very D-Day specific vehicles that you have in your collection.
The funnies.
The funnies, of course, and thank you very much, of course, to Chris Copson for getting so involved in that. And then we went up to Portsmouth, did some work there with the D-Day story, which was brilliant. I have to say, my knowledge before of the landing craft tanks was pretty non-existent, but a fascinating place to visit. Never knew it was there, I'll be perfectly honest for you, and what a great place to go. And then we took the ferry, which I haven't done for many years, across to Normandy, of course, and the trouble in Normandy was what to look at in Normandy, because there is so much. There is so much. A
museum on every corner almost.
Absolutely, but they're good as well, aren't they? Every single one is fascinating. Every town you go into obviously has a backstory. Everything's really, really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you went down to the French Tank Museum as well, which has got an absolutely incredible collection. For anyone who hasn't made it down there, I mean, I thought it was fantastic. I went for the first time a couple of years ago. Couldn't believe just how vast it was. I mean, it was almost as good as the Tank Museum.
You have to be very careful what you say here, don't you? But I mean, obviously for us, their AMX collection is absolutely second to none. I mean, it is fantastic. And we, watch this space, because we're going to be doing, I'm not sure I should be telling you this, we're going to be doing a lot more with them in the future.
Oh, hang on a minute. No, they're a fantastic organisation, our friends over in France. And I suppose, looking back over 80 years, from our kind of modern perspective, it's very difficult to communicate just what a massive operation D-Day was, just how big it was, how many men and machines and vehicles are actually involved, right?
Incredible. And I think, for me, it's I mean, the stories of D-Day are fascinating. The first-person accounts is what really stirs me. I find it amazing that every book, every article I've read about it, how many were, obviously had no idea what they're embarking upon at that particular stage. The number that had lied about their age to go over there, we were talking to drivers of tanks that were 15 years old or something, just lied about their age to go across there. So it is remarkable, a landmark point, a turning point of history, the end, if you like, of World War Two. And as I said, Normandy itself, incredible region, and respect to them for they've never forgotten that part of history there. As you said, everywhere you go, every museum we went to, Maisie Battery was the first for me. I'd never been to Maisie Battery before. An incredible story to Maisie Battery. The fact that they've left it basically undisturbed, just dug it out, got all the vegetation and growth out of the way. Incredible. I mean, incredible place to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, well, there's some activity starting to build up behind us now. So I think very shortly we'll go over to the arena. But just whilst they're getting set up, what we're going to be seeing shortly is an example of the kind of fighting that was happening in France after D-Day and into Belgium and Germany. And it's going to be, the kind of example of the Germans doing a fighting retreat across the country, of course. The Germans, following, the battles of Normandy, when the Allies had secured Normandy, were very much fighting on the defensive, weren't they?
And I think what we have to appreciate here is, a lot of reenactors involved in this, and it's a lot of effort to put this together. And some people, whether they like or not the art of reenactment, etc., it is a great way, the living history side of it, a great way to bring the story to life.
Absolutely. I mean, living history has always been a big part of TANKFEST, and these are people with day jobs. This is just a hobby for them, but they take it so very seriously. Getting the details right for them is so incredibly important. And we try and make sure that we're only working with the very best living history reenactors, and we certainly are this year, without exception. And yeah, the detail and again their commitment to making sure that they portray these soldiers accurately is really quite remarkable and quite commendable. And of course, they're not actors, but they are putting on these battles here for our audience. And I think the way that these battles, love them or hate them, quite a lot of people, I know yourself as a former soldier, have strong feelings about them. Mixed feelings about them.
As I said, it's a great way to bring the history to life, of course. Yeah,
absolutely. And again, particularly for the children in the audience, it's a great way of trying to explain and give people a little bit of an idea of what it was really like.
And I can imagine for yourselves as the museum, the setup of this, we've got pyrotechnics involved, of course, which is always the safety aspects of everything.
Absolutely, and I think without mention of pyrotechnics, Rich, I think it's time that we took cover and went over...
Let's get out of the way, shall we?
Yeah, let's get out of the way.
Ah, no, that's it. The Germans open fire. That's it. They're bringing some fire down. And very sensibly, the initial recce troops are withdrawing to a safe distance. Now, the Germans have sprung the ambush. And it's developing into a bit of a firefight. Now, at this point, the Stuart is giving some usable muscle to the American infantry. Ah, now there's a different matter. The 76 open fire. It's all changed. The balance has changed immediately. That big gun in operation, the Stuart is now very, very vulnerable. It's worth listening, ladies and gentlemen, to the difference in the pattern of firepower coming from the Germans and the Allies. The Germans are using single-shot Mauser 98 rifles. The Americans are armed, at least many of them, with semi-automatic weapons. There's a Browning automatic rifle there, a BAR, light machine gun. They have access to much more ammunition than the Germans do. Now then, we have a second recce vehicle coming in. This is a British-built vehicle. This is the Daimler armoured car, mounting 2-pounder gun. Again, not necessarily a fighting vehicle. It had its best days in the Western Desert, but then that is true of the 222, which is coming in now on the back of the German side there. These are vehicles which are not necessarily frontline vehicles anymore, but they're what are available. The Allies are getting into combat what they've got, as are the Germans. Now there's the Daimler's been hit. The Daimler's been hit. Yeah, flames on the Daimler now. The 222 is opening fire with this 20mm. It's a little bit of stalemate here, ladies and gentlemen. The Allies can't advance in the face of this German firepower, but the Germans can't decisively win the field. No, the Jeep is coming in. This is... yeah, this is a bit of a risk, ladies and gentlemen. The Jeep, as we've said, is soft-skinned, but it does mount that 50 caliber machine gun. Now, the 50 caliber originally designed towards the end of the First World War as an anti-tank weapon. So it's a serious bit of firepower. If they get into operation. Now, although the Daimler's been hit, it's moving forward. The Allied troops are moving forward. These guys from the 29th Division, they landed at Omaha, so they know what a tough fight is like. And again, they're trying to suppress the German position, use their weight of firepower. The Germans are attempting to flank the Americans, but already we can see some more American infantry coming in. So there's going to be a sort of two-pronged firefight going on here. There's the original roadblock, and there's a peripheral fight here as the Germans are trying to flank the initial advance and themselves being flanked by the Americans. The American infantry had a little mantra: find them, fix them, flank them, and finish them. And that's what they're trying to do now. They're trying to flank the Germans and to finish them off. Now the Germans are bringing in Panzer Grenadiers in the 251. 251 lightly armoured, but it's mounting a couple of very... there we go. My goodness, the Stuart's been hit now. This is far from that. Heavy Russian-built gun is really giving the Germans now some teeth. They're deploying the Panzer Grenadiers out the back of the 251. The 251 itself is armed with at least one heavy machine gun, which they may or may not be able to deploy. It looks as if they're going to. It is an MG42, which has a rate of fire of well in excess of 1,000 rounds a minute. So much so the GIs called it Hitler's buzzsaw. Now there's more Allied armour coming in. There is M24 Chaffee and an M4 Sherman. Now I can hear that 50 caliber on the deep firing. Yep, there he is. That is a serious weapon, still in use today. Right, there's a BAR I can see there up on the high ground. What the Allies are doing is using their weight of materiel here now. They have got more ammunition. They have got access to more armour than the Germans have. Now the Germans can still do damage here, we know that. They're making the Allies pay. The Hanomag's been hit now. Yep, that 76mm on the M4A2 is going to be, I think, the pivotal thing here. The Germans have nothing that can stand against that. The American reinforcements have taken the high ground. They're flanking the Germans. Germans aren't giving up. They're not going to relinquish this ground easily. It looks as if they've had a misfire with their heavy weapon. And yeah, the artillerymen here are now fighting as infantry. The balance is swinging clearly in the Allied favour. The Chaffee is flanking the German position, using its speed. It's got the 75mm gun there, which is deploying against the 222. It's hit the 222. Right, that's burning. The Germans now have no armour. There's still some artillery coming in, but it's not going to save this position. We're getting to the crux of this action, ladies and gentlemen. And notice again the GIs armed either with semi-automatic weapons or with semi-automatic carbines. And yeah, it's over, I think. The Germans are beginning to surrender. And the Hoch is interesting. Many of these young Americans will be of German extraction. They probably speak German as a second language, so they can communicate their intentions quite clearly. However, this is a dangerous time. Spirits, blood's running very, very high. I'm sure both sides intend to recognize the Geneva Convention, but that's not necessarily a given at this stage in the war. One of the advantages which the Allies haven't chosen to deploy is air superiority. On a day like today, the biggest worry that the Kampfgruppe would have would be the J-bows, the fighter bombers, the British Typhoons, the American Thunderbolts, armed with 3-inch rockets that were capable of decimating any ground troops, any movement of ground troops. They haven't appeared today. But that would be the sort of thing which would effectively limit the movement of the Germans at this stage in the war. Oh, a round of applause. Well done. It's important to remember, I think, that many of these German soldiers we've seen here, some of them would have been as young as 15 or 16 years old. Just think about that for a moment, ladies and gentlemen. Their first experience of combat would have been being shipped out to defend the border of Festung Deutschland, of Fortress Germany. Some of them would have been fired up with the spirit that they had picked up in the Hitler Youth, but others would have been frankly terrified. On the American side, many of these young men had probably never left their home state, let alone travel thousands of miles overseas to take part in a global war of unprecedented ferocity. One of the main roles of our reenactors this afternoon
We're at the Tank Museum for TANKFEST 2024, and we've just seen the battle reenactment there, which is our first live segment of the day. Plenty of pops and bangs to wake everybody up.
And the outcome was no surprise for anybody.
No surprises for the outcome. It was Allies 1, Germany 0. Now, we're joined by another special guest today. This is Romain Doublé, a YouTuber all the way from Normandy in France. Welcome to the Tank Museum. Welcome to TANKFEST.
Hi everyone, I'm Rom from Military Machine France. I'm from Normandy. You're talking about D-Day. It's the place to be.
A beautiful region as well.
Really beautiful, with a lot of remains of history about the Second World War. We have a lot of tanks too. It's really cool. And since I was, sorry for my French, my English French.
It's very good.
Since I was young, I grew up with armor, wheels, a lot of parts of tanks everywhere. Because after the war, a lot of tanks, broken tanks, stay like at a train junkyard with a lot of tanks everywhere. It was just a dream. And in the 90s, I can find a lot of parts, really everywhere. Sorry.
You're doing a great job. So this isn't your first TANKFEST either. You have joined us here before. What are your impressions?
It's really, really impressive to see all of the tanks in the arena. I don't know how it's possible to see all of these tanks. It's incredible. I love that.
Do you have a particular favorite vehicle on display here today?
Yeah, really. Inside the tank, I love the Yak Tiger.
The Yak Tiger.
Really big, yeah, big gun, incredible.
Very nice. And we have a French reenactment living history area. Did you manage to check those guys out?
No.
No?
No.
Oh, you must.
But
You must.
Yeah.
You have to go over and test their French language skills later on.
Okay, interesting.
Now, Romain, we were talking a bit earlier on about your plans for the future, which I have to say are very exciting. So, do you think you could share a few of these plans? No, without giving too much away, of course.
Yeah, maybe. I can talk a little bit because I'm working a lot with the French army. I have a big chance for my media to talking about military in France, and more than with Musée des Blindés, the French Tank Museum. We have some projects like Joe with the FV4005. We would like maybe one day to make the AMX-50 the biggest French tank ever, 50 tons. Incredible.
That was my favourite tank when I went to the French tank. I thought it was fantastic, and actually I would love to see it running, particularly here at the Tank Museum for TANKFEST in the future, maybe.
Maybe one day. I would like.
And it's sat next to, I remember in the museum it's sat next to another huge French tank. Is it the ARL-50? The one it's sat next to in the museum?
Or the ARL-44?
44, yeah.
44,
yeah.
My mistake, yeah. And that's another fantastic example of the kind of stuff that they've got in Samuel.
And it's just after the Second War. It's incredible. Incredible.
So what ignited your passion then? Why, you know, as a young man, why Was it purely living in Normandy, you think, that made you so interested in military vehicles, or have you always had a fascination?
Always. Because I love mechanics, and I love the engineering, the work about that. Like Percy Hobart for the D-Day.
Yeah.
It's just incredible. The duplex drive, a tank in the water. Wow, what's this? And in Normandy, we really grew up with history about Second War everywhere. It's unique, really unique. And I invite everyone to see one day this place like La Pointe du Hoc, the Overlord Museum with a lot of unique tanks from the D-Day.
Mm-hmm.
I love my country and I love my Normandy.
Fantastic stuff. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Roman. That's just to remind you of his YouTube channel. It's militarymachine.fr. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Excellent.
So make sure you go and check it out.
Go and check it out. And here's an example of the kind of thing that you might see on his YouTube channel.
Hi everyone, I'm Rom from Military Machine France.
And I am Adrien from the French Tank Museum.
We are French, like le champagne.
Or a baguette.
Or like this unique AMX 50. To celebrate the return of the beautifully restored AV 4005 by my friend Joe, what could be better than this tank? Adrien, please, tell me more about this tank.
Okay, let's go. Here is the AMX 50B. This is a French beast. AMX 50 for 50 tons. This vehicle was built to fight other armored vehicles, like the 4005. The main difference is the 4005 had a really big gun, like really, really big. This one is lighter, only 120 millimeters. But the peculiarity of AMX 50B is its autoloader. This vehicle can fire 5 times more quickly than a vehicle like the I-3, that was a big beast from Russia. AMX 50 and other vehicles were built to fight in the event of a Third World War. The AMX 50B in front of us is the last surviving example of the AMX 50 family.
And I love the particularity with the oscillating turret. It's very unique, like the AMX 13.
Absolutely. AMX 13 or Batignolles Chatillon. We do have one.
Maybe a project.
Maybe.
See you soon, Bovington.
Thanks again to Roman and our friends at Saumur, the Tank Museum of France. So, what's coming up, Richard?
What is coming up? So, of course, I think something which we all can't wait for, the FV 4005 doing a run around the arena, which is going to be truly incredible.
Absolutely.
Cold War tanks, of course. We've got the arena display
the big
for that.
beast of the Cold War.
We will finish up
like
the day.
yourself.
Big beast. Thank you very much. I'm not sure how to take that. British Army segment finishing up the day, of course. And also a big shout out for the museum, of course. May seem a bit early, but TANKFEST 2025 tickets are already on sale.
Absolutely, and you know, when the sun's shining, there's nowhere else we'd rather be, is there, than here at TANKFEST. TANKFEST 2025 tickets are available now from the Tank Museum website, tankmuseum.org.
Good job you didn't get that wrong, of course.
No, that would have been very awkward, wouldn't it?
Now, while on the subject of events at the museum, Nick, what else have you coming up between now and then, really?
So, alongside TANKFEST, which of course, you know, our biggest event of the year, we have a couple of model shows that run every year. The next one is in September. But perhaps after TANKFEST, our most significant event is Tiger Day. And that's an event that we actually did a live stream from a couple of years ago with yourselves. And as you may know from the name, that's the event where we get Tiger 131 out and run it before the audience. And that whole event really is based around the Tiger, the myth of the Tiger, how this particular Tiger was captured by British troops fighting in North Africa in 1943, and how we brought that vehicle back to life.
It's just such a... I mean, I remember coming down to my first Tiger Day, and I have to say that it's, for whatever reason, it's just so incredibly popular. You know, it's very emotive, seeing it drive around. Nothing compares, no matter how many videos I've seen, how many films, standing, you know, relatively close to it when it's running. It's like nothing I've ever experienced.
It's strange, isn't it, that out of all of the amazing vehicles that we've got in the collection, there doesn't seem to be anything quite like Tiger 131 in terms of the notoriety or fame it seems to have achieved. And for that reason, it's the only vehicle we think that could probably carry an event entirely on its own. There's only one tank that people would specifically come and see, which is kind of unusual, really, when you think about it.
It is truly amazing. And do you think going forwards, you know, there are rumours abound. Other countries, other private collectors, other museums, obviously may get Tiger 1 and Tiger 2, of course, on the road again. Wouldn't it be a dream to have more than one Tiger on the Tiger Day?
Absolutely. I mean, currently Tiger 131 is the world's only running Tiger, but we know that's not going to be the case for the other. We know there's numerous projects currently going on it, not least with the French Tank Museum, who have a very interesting example which they're looking at bringing together. They've also got a running Tiger 2, a King Tiger, which, you know, maybe they'd like to bring over here and run alongside the Tiger. That'd be absolutely fantastic.
Now, of course, keeping on top of these vehicles, I mean, they must take an awful lot of maintenance to keep, you know, Tiger 1 on the road.
Absolutely.
And that really is down to the dedication and the professionalism, of course, of your workshop team.
Yeah.
And earlier on, I got a chance to catch up with Chris van Schaardenberg, who's the fleet manager here at the Tank Museum.
Head of collections.
He'll
get upset
I got that wrong.
if you call him a
He's
fleet
gonna kill
manager.
me,
Yeah.
So we've just come over to the workshops in the Tank Museum to catch up with my favourite person, fleet manager, Chris. Chris, day before TANKFEST, how's it going?
Yeah, it's going well. Good to see you again here. Yeah, we had a busy couple of weeks preparing for this, but we had quite a few cancellations, unfortunately, this year. But we managed to keep a good size for the display, and we're quite happy with what we have. So yeah, hopefully no more breakdowns or letdowns. But there was some good support from some key guest vehicles and from the home team that have really worked hard in recent weeks, months to get this all ready.
I think for the breakdowns, it goes to show, though, doesn't it, that obviously, you know...
Yeah, I mean, your favourite vehicle, the Chieftain. Unfortunately, last week they brought it down, inspected it, they drove it down to the arena, all was well. They had a tea break afterwards, they tried to go, and boom, no power on the engine. We looked at it, we thought we identified the problem, the guys worked hard on it to get it going, and it turned out to be something else. We said, listen, we have so many other vehicles, this year will unfortunately have to be without the howl of the Chieftain, and then focus on the others. Otherwise you try to spin too many plates and they won't all be ready, so we decided to park it up, investigate it properly, and then focus on the ones we have out there. We still have about 42, 43 vehicles out there, so it's a nice lineup, plus 10 from the Army, and yeah, again, great hopes.
And obviously a lot of disappointment from everybody, JS3.
Yes, and of course our colleagues in Belgium had a similar problem. They had a clutch failure on the JS, they were gutted. Every time you speak to people when they have to cancel, they're all gutted because they put so much effort into it like we do. But we all know the symptoms, so people are very apologetic. Oh, we did this. Listen, we know the problem. We've been working on things for weeks, and then something happens last minute. So it happens, it's part of the game. And but everyone has been really supportive, trying to help with other vehicles and calling their mates to, oh, maybe this one can join us, and the guys here. First the Chieftain, and of course we had to park it up. Here's the Valentine still in bits, and the guys are working through it. They worked, Dan and Bob were here last night at 8:30, 9 o'clock, still finishing, have done that for the last few days. What happened, we had steering clutches, we very, very last minute figured out they were the wrong ones. We had in a previous restoration job years ago copied material that wasn't right, dimensionally. Andrew Rowe was great in New Zealand, he sent us a new clutch packs. They arrived last minute, but one was sent back to New Zealand and we had to wait again. It arrived last week and the guys have been flat out building this, and they're finishing this tonight, and they said we're going for it and see what happens. So I'm really proud of what they're doing, and that spirit to just make sure we have a TANKFEST and have the vehicles out, and they take great pride in what they do.
Absolutely, and then, I mean, I think it's worth a mention to everybody from your team. I mean, you've got the staff who are here all the time, all the volunteers as well. I mean, it must be a real team effort to get TANKFEST off the ground.
It is. This week leading up to TANKFEST, we had a lot of volunteers, and then they're doing everything from vehicle moves, helping with the repairs, to preparing the Vehicle Conservation Centre for display, to help setting up pyros, to help You name it, we've done it. Moving all these vehicles, a lot of the vehicles that are in here are out of the Vehicle Conservation Centre to make room in there for the weekend. They're all over the place helping us. They're camping on site and they're crewing, of course, the vehicles this weekend. So without them, we would be lost. But yeah, great team effort by staff volunteers and great guest supporters, guest vehicle owners, as we call them. And they've been friends of the museum for many years. A couple of new ones, which is nice to see, but it's really going well.
Brilliant. Chris, I mean, again, thank you so much. Fingers crossed everything goes to plan. If there was one thing that you worry about as the fleet manager then for TANKFEST, what would it be?
Just look forward to one day, really. But no, it's all about safety, and it's great to see all the vehicles here. Great to see the FV405 there, which I use, and the support we had from you, Wargaming. They did a phenomenal job as well to getting this here on time. So yeah, I just look forward to it, but I also want it to be safely over, that we can do it again in the years ahead.
Brilliant. Chris, thank you so much once again for everything. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And welcome back to TANKFEST Online 2024. A massive thank you to Chris there, who I'm definitely going to have to buy a beer for getting his job title wrong.
Maybe more than one.
Maybe more than one.
Yeah, well, Richard, of all the vehicles, imagine that. The Chieftain's broken down, eh?
There's a surprise.
I mean, that's something that you've probably got more experience of than you'd like to admit, am I right?
Isn't it terrible that the poor old girl has this terrible reputation for breaking down? But may I stress and emphasise that this was earlier models and a lot of those problems were ironed out
absolutely,
in the later models.
You weren't keen to jump in there and try and fix it then?
I wasn't at all. No, my days of driving a Chieftain of being covered in oil and smelling terrible are well and truly over.
Yeah, but I mean, the fact is, of course, that the Chieftain wasn't, in those early days as reliable as, previous British tank designs, so like the Centurion, which is arguably the most successful British tank design ever.
Absolutely. I mean, the Centurion reliability is probably its middle name, to be perfectly honest. I mean, a fantastic design. I mean, really, really good design. And again, I think it's worth mentioning when I'm just coming out of the workshop portion there, the fact that, the amount of work they did there. One thing that's always amazed me about the workshops team is, my time in the army, we had a particular tank to look at. The majority, the different variations, the mechanics and everything of that is quite incredible. And we can hear the rumble now, so I think it's time for us to go back live to the arena and look at celebrating the Centurions.
To the Royal Netherlands Army, and they very kindly brought this one all the way over from their historic collection. This is with the 20-pounder gun. Now, the very first Centurions are produced in early 1945. They're rushed out to Germany in something called Operation Sentry. They don't quite make it in time. They miss the end of the war by a few weeks. But they stay in Germany till July 1945, being tested. They've got different armament arrangements. You can see one of them is in our World War II display. First biggest gun, 17-pounder. They tried the 77mm we had on the Comet, and they put a secondary armament of a Polston cannon on some of them. Very quickly, after that Mark I Centurion, we put the 20-pounder gun. That's this gun that you can see on this variant of the Centurion. And that is one of the reasons it's such a great tank, because it's 17-pounder, 20-pounder, and a bit in a moment we're going to see one with a 105mm, the L7 gun. It all gets confusing. We stopped drop in the war years, the weight of shot. 32 pounds was going to be another gun we were going to use, but we didn't. We go to the L7 105mm gun, and we'll see that coming on as well. 3 gun types we can upgrade on the same tank, giving it that extra firepower when it's necessary. Now, in the back of the Centurion is that Meteor engine. We pump it up a bit so it can get about 650 horsepower. The gun is able to knock out pretty much anything in the early days on the battlefield, but we'll see how that changes. But there's a threat in the background. We know about the JS3, the Russian heavy tank. We found one in the ruins of Berlin. They've measured the armour. What's coming next is the question. What if they've got a bigger tank after the JS3? When Stalin dies in the early 50s, they rename them, they forget Stalin's name, they call them the T-10 tank instead. We know the Russians have built about 2,000 of those. What if they get an even bigger gun than the 122mm that they put on the JS3? What if there's going to be something bigger coming? So we start thinking, how can we increase our tank fleet, and what gun might be able to knock out the next generation of heavy Russian tanks? Unbeknownst to us, Khrushchev, who becomes president in the Soviet Union, he drops their heavy tank program. He doesn't like heavy tanks. We don't know that, so we start some experiments that leads to this monster, FV 4005, with an enormous 183mm gun on it. Now, during the war years in Britain, we've come up with a new type of round. We call it high explosive squash head, HESH. And we like it because it means instead of just upping the amount of kinetic energy, instead of just upping the amount of welly behind the round that comes out the end of the barrel, with a HESH round, as long as you get it on the target, it'll do the damage. And it's basically a case full of plastic explosive. When it hits the target, it impacts and spreads out, and then it detonates a microsecond after impact. And that spread out piece of plastic explosive sends a shockwave through the enemy tank, and a massive scab flies off of metal on the inside. And if you get a big enough HESH round, it will pretty much send a shockwave through however thick the armour is on what we thought was going to be that next Soviet-era tank. So they experiment with a 183mm gun. That's this fellow here. The first iteration they try, same barrel, but they try an auto-assist system. In other words, it's not quite an auto-loader, but the rounds, the projectile and the case that keeps the propellant in, so big that we need some help loading them in the barrel. Doesn't quite work as effectively. So we decide we're going to get two loaders, one to put the first part of the projectile in, followed by that big brass case, and they get the idea in the back of their head, hang on a second, what if this new heavy Soviet tank start coming along a bit sooner than later? Let's make a turret in case we're going to need that in a bit of a hurry. Hence the second iteration we can see here of FV 4005. This is what we might have had to build if the project had continued. They use the hull of a Centurion. It's not necessarily what it was going to go on. Mark III and Mark V Centurion hulls are used. It's just really to be able to take the thing around, see what it's like that way. And you can see there just the scale of that size of turret that's needed. Basically the turret will stop small arms, not a lot else. But that space for the two loaders, the support there to hold that gun in place so it doesn't break its mountains as it drives along. And on the rear of FV 4005 you can see there's a spade, an anchor. A winch lowers that so it can dig into the ground when that gun fires over the front. You can fire it for about a 45-degree arc out on the front there. You then put the gun completely to one side because probably if you fired then, you're likely to turn the tank over. So that ground anchor helps. They think about 80 tons of pressure going backwards when a gun that big fires. So you really don't want the tank moving back about a couple of yards every time that goes off. A couple of hundred rounds fired from this as test ones. The project is stopped though in 1955 because the idea is now we think, hang on, you can do the same thing with missiles. So let's drop that. But I know a number of you here have helped support the restoration of FB4005. Thanks very much for that, including World of Tanks. It's a vehicle, some of you, if you remember years ago, that turret used to be in our kids' play area. But there we are, with the guys, the team that's in there, they've put that back together again. So, a wonderful lineup of Centurions. So I mentioned that first one, the Dutch Army one here with a 20-pounder gun. Our 20-pounder gun Centurions go off and fight in the Korean War. They do tremendously well there. They completely outclass the T-34-85s. The firepower they've got and the quickness of the gunnery. 3 rounds off, they start training within 20 seconds. Accurately. That is a real leap forward in accurate gunnery. So basically the Korean War makes a Centurion tank and everyone then wants to buy it. So lots of countries come to Britain to say, can we buy Centurions off you? And of course Britain is desperate to sell them. We're a bankrupt nation, we've lost all our money in World War II. If we can sell tanks, that's the way we can make money again. The trouble is, the Korean War, we need the tanks for ourselves. And on that list, we then prioritise Commonwealth countries like Canada and other NATO countries first. So countries like the Dutch, they're in NATO, so we are only ready to sell them tanks, about 53, they're the first ones. And we've actually got a Swiss and a Swedish Centurion out here as well. We can't sell the Swiss tanks till 1955. It's about the first time we've got enough spare that we can actually sell them. The Swiss first put in their order for Centurions in 1950. And as they're waiting, they buy some AMX-13s. We'll see one of those later as well. Now, each country that buys the Centurion tank ends up adapting it slightly to their own needs. So the Dutch Army Centurion we can see going around has got the spare wheels on the back of the turret. If you look very closely, the machine gun mount is different than it will be on a British Centurion. Small adaptations to meet the local needs. And again, as that tank goes off down the far end, look at the markings on it. It's another good way of telling what country that vehicle comes from. But fantastic vehicle that's brought over by the Royal Netherlands Army for us. when you drive a tank, to turn corners every time the driver wants to go left, he's got to pull back on the left stick in front of him. 2 sticks, pull on the left stick, it brakes the left track, and the right track keeps going, so you slightly go to the left. You'll notice as he's driving around, when you drive a tank, you don't go round a corner in a nice smooth arc, you go round corners like the edge of a 50p piece. Straight line, pull on that brake on whatever side you want to turn, another straight line, another pull on the brake. And the whole idea there is if you keep pulling on that brake, your brakes will overheat and they bind, they get sticky, so you won't go anywhere. That's why you see tanks doing these funny angles all the time. Now this Centurion has got a different gun to that earlier Dutch 20-pounder armed Centurion. The reason for this is in 1956, in the Hungarian uprising, a captured T-54A tank was driven into the British Embassy compound. The British Defence Attaché was able to crawl all over this vehicle and they measured the frontal armour. The message goes back to Britain, hang on a second, we might have a problem here. This is thick armour on that new T-54A. So we start a project at Fort Halstead in Kent, where they develop a new gun. It comes out as being called the L7 105mm gun, so 10.5 centimetres, the hole at the end of the barrel. It is a tremendously effective gun, especially firing these new, as they call, natures of ammunition, discarding sabot, a slug of tungsten surrounded by a pot, supersonic speed towards the enemy tank, pot's falling away, that slug of tungsten will punch through the enemy's armour. Now that L7 gun was so effective, we put it on our Centurions from the beginning of the 1960s. Other countries upgraded their Centurions with that gun. This, by the way, is a Mark 13 Centurion, the last of the gun tanks in British Army service. Obviously all these different upgrades, different times, we give them different marks. Mark 13, the last one we're using as a gun tank. That gun is so effective, it makes some of the tanks we've already built with bigger guns, like the Conqueror, 120mm gun. The M103 we're going to see in the Cold War section, huge great American tank with a 120mm gun. They become redundant because the 105mm gun can do the same thing and are much cheaper and much easier. So it's a really important bit of kit. So every time we look at these vehicles, it means the Centurion is a threat again on the battlefield. It's still very potent, and that gun is so successful. The Germans put it on the Leopard 1, the Americans put it on the first Abrams, the Swiss put it on the PZ-61. 35,000 tanks around the world ended up carrying that L7 105mm gun, or a derivative, something copied or built under license. Now, we can see there the next tank driving around has got one of those 105mm guns on it. This is one of the tanks we sold to Switzerland when they were finally allowed to. 1955, they can start getting them. And again, small features on there. Again, if you look when the commander goes past, in front of him is a different mount for the Swiss machine gun. They use something that looks a bit like an MG34 out there. Again, where they put their spare wheel, look at the registration on the front as well. You can tell it's not got the British markings on it. Now, the Swiss kindly gave us this example from their reserve stock. They tend to keep all their equipment in underground shelters, and very kindly gave this mint example. They're very conscious in Switzerland, and they knew they were vulnerable. America, by the way, after the war, they didn't want us to sell them tanks. They were still a bit miffed with the Swiss for being so neutral in World War II. We needed the money. That's the honest truth of it. We just really needed the money there. The engine, still the Meteor engine, that British engine derived from the famous Merlin, so that keeps it going. But for some countries, if you're going to keep the tank in service, you've spent a lot of money on it, we're going to do other things to those tanks. So the Israelis realised, hang on a second, 600 horsepower, is that still enough? So in Israel, with the Centurion tanks they've got, they put a new engine in the back, a Continental diesel engine. And it was very successful, giving extra power. And so other countries copied the idea. So we've got there a Swedish Centurion. See how it sounds so different if you're listening to these things. And that's because the Swedish army copied what the Israelis did. Let's put a new engine in the back to give more lifespan, better power to the vehicle. So we've actually got a Continental diesel there in this Swedish version. And the Swedes, like many countries, they up-armour their tanks in progress. You see the British one, extra armour on the front. Here we've got reactive armour. That rather jazzy Swedish camouflage scheme on there. Slightly different shaped engine deck because of the new engine on the rear, and additional armour placed on the front, reactive armour that explodes when it's hit by an incoming round. The whole idea there, again developed by the Israelis, Blazer it was called originally. These square blocks you see on a number of tanks, the whole idea is when an incoming round hits it, it explodes, and the aim is to take the blast away from the vehicle. So it's another way of trying to protect the vehicle. This beautiful vehicle was actually handed over to Britain in about 2001. I just started here at the Tank Museum. Chief of the Defence Staff of Britain did a trip to Sweden to meet his equivalent number. What can we do together? At the end of the meeting, the Chief of the British Defence Staff handed over the official gift, something like an ashtray with a crown on or something. The Swedish general handed over the keys to this Centurion and said, you might like one of these back. This is one of the first Centurion tanks we ever sold to Sweden, and it's gone through all those upgrade processes. And very kindly, the Chief of the Defence Staff said, yep, we'll accept it on behalf of the Tank Museum. We'll take it down to the Tank Museum. So people sometimes ask us, where do we get the tanks? Do we buy them? Do we do whatever? Some are captured in war. They're analysed here at places like Chertsey or Shrivenham, various other places afterwards. Still going on to this day. You can imagine there's captured material that's come back.
We're at the Tank Museum for TANKFEST 2024, and we've just seen the highlight vehicle really from the entire display, and I've just got to say, wow, it really is.
It is so impressive, isn't it? Although we've seen, you know, obviously photos, to see it up close like that, I mean, it is a gargantuan, isn't it?
Absolutely, and to think, you know, it's been sat for many years as a gate guardian, to finally see it going around the arena is absolutely incredible. And even more amazing, of course, the whole thing probably wouldn't even have ever happened if Joe Hughes hadn't have been a World of Tanks player.
Absolutely. I mean, what a partnership it's turned out to be. So a partnership, you know, between us at World of Tanks and, of course, our fantastic players, yourselves and your supporters, and Mr. Joe Hughes, really, for doing all that hard work. And he was up against it to get it ready for TANKFEST.
Yeah, he absolutely was. And, of course, he covered the work on his YouTube channel. So if you'd like to find out more, do go and check his YouTube out. And to be fair, do you know what? He's a really nice bloke as well, isn't he?
Fantastic, absolutely. So he's very proud, and rightly so, of what he's achieved there, and more than happy to show anything around. So, yeah, please check out his YouTube channel.
Yeah, no, it's been really has been one of those success stories, and we're very grateful to all of the support that we've had from our supporters, from the World of Tanks players, and of course from Joe Hughes and his crew as well. But yeah, it just shows that, you know, sometimes these partnerships can be incredibly beneficial between, you know, ourselves.
Partnerships and projects is what it's all about, and I believe a little birdie tells me that perhaps the museum's embarking on another.
Absolutely, because teamwork makes the dream work. And in this next VT, you can find out a little bit more about our next vehicle project and how you can get involved.
Almost every home or garage hides a dark secret, the abandoned project.
This is ours, the M47. It's the only M47 that the Tank Museum has, and it's never been on public display before. It spent most of its service life with the Italian army, from whom it was acquired in 1987. Not long after, museum volunteers set to the task of restoring it to running order. But that was nearly 30 years ago.
In that time, the Tank Museum's volunteers have helped restore numerous historic tanks, swelling the Tank Museum's running collection for our enjoyment at events like TANKFEST.
But with all of that work to do, the M47 project went further down the to-do list, and it's been waiting here ever since. But with your help, we can change that. We want to reassemble and restore our M47 for the first time since it arrived here, for it to be ready in time for TANKFEST 2025. This will involve a full system overhaul and cosmetic restoration for it to be ready by June next year.
The US-built M47 probably isn't the most interesting tank in history, but it's still an important part of the Cold War story. Rushed into production at the outbreak of the Korean War in 1950, it featured an M46 hull with an improved turret, mounting a more powerful 90mm gun. It never saw action with the US forces and was quickly superseded by the M48, but large numbers were supplied to US allies around the world. With almost 2,500, of which this was one, Italy received the largest number. But they were also used in large numbers by nations including Belgium, Germany, Spain, Turkey, Jordan, Iran, Pakistan, Portugal and Austria. Where in 1965, a young Arnold Schwarzenegger completed his military service as an M47 crew member. He liked the M47 so much that he bought the very tank he served in and had it shipped from Austria to his US home in 1992.
Having a fully functioning M47 would be a great addition to our collection of running Cold War vehicles. But to fund this, we need to raise £50,000. There's a lot of work to do, but we think we've got the best person for the job.
We're partnering with engineer Matthew Pyle, who has recently completed his own M47 restoration project. As a result, there isn't anything worth knowing about the M47 that he doesn't already know.
Support our M47 project today by helping us raise £50,000 in memory of every project you've started but never finished. Let's get this done. Visit tankmuseum.org/M47 to get involved.
And another great project the museum are embarking on there, Nick.
Yeah, and absolutely, what a great choice. You can't argue with Arnold Schwarzenegger, who is, of course, a tank connoisseur. So, yeah, it's a fantastic, it will be a fantastic addition to our running fleets. We're very excited at getting started in that. And if you would like to support us, head over to tankmuseum.org/M47, and there you'll see the different ways that you can support us. There are different perks for different levels of support. And already, I'm pleased to say that we're well over 10% of the way to our £50,000 target since we launched the appeal on Friday, so that is absolutely fantastic. But of course there are other ways that you can support the Tank Museum. We are a registered charity, and if you are appreciating our free live stream of TANKFEST 2024, please go to the Tank Museum's online shop, tankmuseumshop.org, and find yourself something that you never knew you needed. My choice would be the tank slippers every time. Do you have a pair?
Do you know, funnily enough, I was just thinking straight away they're tank slippers. I remember vividly, it was the last TANKFEST actually that I bought my wife a pair of tank slippers.
Was she grateful?
No.
Oh.
No, she really didn't think it was amusing or...
Perhaps this time if you buy her a Haynes Sherman manual or something like that, she might appreciate that a little bit more.
Absolutely.
Fantastic stuff.
So now then, we just saw the video there. Now the man that's going to actually put this together for the museum, the project, is a Mr. Matt Pyle. And earlier, I had a chance to catch up on the tank park with him. So here we are now, back down on the tank park, and I've caught up with Mr. Matt Pyle. Now Matt is the owner of this very impressive M47 pattern. Matt, thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to us. That looks like a bit of a restoration
It was, yeah. 3 years of headaches. I think it saved my marriage, though.
What sort of state was it in when you received it then?
It was in a bad state. You know, it was pretty stripped out. He'd had a go at trying to paint it up inside and hadn't really got anywhere. And I think he just sort of like lost interest. He had quite a few other vehicles in his little collection, and yeah, just sat in the corner. But luckily enough, it was in a corner of a barn, so that saved it really.
So it's a proper barn find.
Yeah, to a degree, but yeah.
And why? I mean, why the pattern? What appealed to you about this particular vehicle?
It was a bit of a case of I'd sold the Chieftain, that had just gone to Canada, and this was in the corner, and I said, I know you're selling vehicles, is that for sale? Yeah. And I just went, yeah, that looks good. It was a challenge.
And how long did it take you to get it to the condition?
3 years.
Wow, long time.
Yeah, that's right.
And what was the hardest part about the whole restoration for you?
Getting people
all of it.
Yeah, all of it to a point. You know, you have days where you don't think anything's going anywhere, and then they're horrible when you get to that stage, and you just have to just slowly chip away at it, you know. But yeah, it's been good. You know, you say what was the hardest bits is getting people to do bits for you, and then nothing. You don't hear anything from them for months, and it ticks along, and yeah, but.
And you enjoy bringing it around a tank fest? I mean, is that the best bit for you when it's all finished and you can show it to the people?
It's really worrying because you've got all the people here and you think, please don't run out of fuel or or stop or go wrong. But that's a real good blast for it, and it went well, and it didn't miss a beat.
And now I believe you're about to embark on another exciting project on behalf of the museum.
Yeah, that's it. Yep. Yeah, I can't wait really. And it's I know it doesn't look good, but it's better than that when I started. So yeah, I can't wait. I think it's been good.
Brilliant,
exciting.
Matt. Thank you so much for your time.
No.
Really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
No, it's brilliant.
And a massive thank you there to Mr. Matt
Almost
Pyle.
every home or garage
as I said,
hides
I
a
always
dark
harp on about
secret.
it. These private collectors really are quite incredible. The amount of work they do, and the way they go about it. I've always thought it must be an incredible task to try and source everything, all the spares and the knowledge that goes with it.
Yep, thank you very much again, and to all of you that are just getting to this point in time, as you're aware, the Twitch drops are coming to its resolution. All you got to do is click claim, make sure you claim and collect all your rewards. Those rewards can vary from what you're about to see on your screen shortly, starting from 30 minutes with some some consumables, 60 minutes for personal reserves, 90 minutes for some premium days, a 2D style or 3D styles, as well as a premium tank. And then at 120 minutes, you have the premium days ranging from 1 to 7 to 360, as well as some more 3D styles, a special Panzerkampfwagen KW1, the style for the grill, the Borask premium tank, the Shat MLE, and otherwise the 100 3D style. And I can't emphasize enough that you should definitely check out our premium store with the styles of the FV 4005, as well as other premium vehicles, of which the proceeds will be going toward, not all, but some, at least, to the Tank Museum. I know Nick likes to make sure we emphasize this part. So we apparently he's now promised to make the TOG a reality one day, somehow. Definitely. Yeah, no, it's a common request, and we hope to keep contributing with all of your help and all of your support from the community as well to make that happen.
So we're about to go to our next live segment, which is going to be some of the biggest and heaviest vehicles that we've got in our collection. And these are all vehicles from the Cold War. The Cold War is a period that effectively stretched from about 1945 to about 1990, 1991. And without meaning to make you sound old, Richard, it does include the majority of the vehicles that you served with during your army career.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Starting with the Centurion.
Not starting with the Centurion. It's a bit of a standing joke with Nick here. No, I did not ever serve on... Yeah, but of course for me, not 1945, I hasten to add. 1983 is when I particularly joined the army. And my first vehicle
That was here in Bovington as well, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, as I said, this museum's always been so close to my heart for so many reasons, because just across the road, to my left-hand shoulder at the moment, Stanley Barracks, where I did my basic training, dropped off there as a 15 years and 7 or 8 months, I think, at that stage it was. I literally dropped off by my father at the front gate. Good luck, son. And,
see you in a year.
Disappeared into the distance, and then embarked on my army career. So, yeah, obviously this whole area.
What made you choose Tank Regiment?
Oh, that's a very good question. Now, at that particular stage of my life, we were actually living. I was born and bred in Bournemouth. We moved to Regis, which, of course, is literally, 10, 15 minutes away from here at the moment. So, and at that stage, we used to quite often see, we've got the Armour Centre here, of course, so you used to see quite often armoured vehicles driving around. And I think it just sort of, my love was always for mechanics, technology I loved as well. It's my thing I used to love when I got a bit older, taking my car apart and not being able to put it back together. I think that's where I got really interested in that side. And I have to say it was the Army, just the Army in general, that as long as I could remember, for some bizarre reason, my go-to toys were always model soldiers. My favourite hobby was playing with my action men and making models and that sort of thing.
And so, a tank crew is composed of many parts. What was your first role as a tank crewman?
So down at Bovington, I was a gunner, my very, very first job. So it was in the days of, it was called the Junior Leaders Regiment, the Royal Armour Corps. Sadly, it no longer exists. But then you used to it was almost like boarding school, for want of a better, reference to it. So we did normal education, maths, English, everything like that. On top of that, of course, we did the basic training for the armed forces, and then when you hit your fourth term, that's when you actually got your trade training. So for me, it was gunnery. Many visits, of course, down to Lulworth, which is only a stone's throw from here, to embark on my gunnery career. And that's my very first job when I joined the regiment, which this is going back a bit, the 3rd Royal Tank Regiment, which at that time was based in Paderborn in Germany.
Fantastic. And then, having been a gunner for a number of years, you ended up being a tank commander, of course, as well. I think by that point, was it moving on to Challenger 1 tanks?
It was, yeah.
From chieftains?
Yeah, I mean, the way that the trade training's based, so obviously to be a commander, you have to have done courses, and you've had experience in every other crew position, because, you have overall responsibility, not just safety, but obviously issuing fire orders, communicating with the other tanks. So the dream for every tank soldier was, of course, to reach the pinnacle, which was a tank commander. So, yeah, Chieftain. I also was a driver briefly on Chieftain, and then on Challenger 1. I was a loader on Challenger 1, and then commander, and then, of course, we transferred to Challenger 2, and I was a commander on Challenger 2.
What do you think, apart from being the commander, of course, because everybody wants to be the commander, what is the best job in a tank?
Oh, the best job in a tank is, apart from the commander, I always loved gunnery.
But you're an instructor as well,
I was a gunnery instructor as well, so again, back to Lulworth, being a gunnery instructor down there for a couple of years, taking foreign students, officers through, teaching them all about gunnery as well. It's great. I think the gunner's position, although it's, from a physical point of view, it's absolutely awful, because you're cramped down there in front of the commander, you're constantly getting kicked in the back, you've got no room to manoeuvre whatsoever. One of the most popular jobs was that of the loader, or the operator.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
You see, I think that would be like the least attractive.
No, because you've got a lot of room, so you can actually, many nights I got my sleeping bag out, and you could sleep curled around on the turret floor in the loader's position.
Thinking about comfort.
Always thinking about comfort. Loading, obviously, the main armament, but also you're the radio man as well, so, helping out on the radio and everything. So, a toss-up, really. But personally, for me, it was the gunnery side of it. Nothing gives you more pleasure than pressing the firing button and seeing that round leave the end of the barrel.
Arc off into the distance. And of course, the Tank Museum, you were in the Royal Tank Regiment, and the Tank Museum is the regimental museum of the Royal Tank Regiment, isn't it? So, what does it mean to you as a former Royal Tank Regiment serviceman to, come back to the Tank Museum?
I have to say, and very recently, I see that you've actually now sort of revamped some of the branding down here, so it's very clear that it is, the regimental museum for the Royal Tank Regiment. And as I said, the whole area is so steeped. You've got the Armour Centre, you've got Lulworth, the Ranges, you've got barracks across the road, and of course you've got the Tank Museum down here as well. So it means an awful lot to us, and it suddenly got very noisy.
Yes, thanks for that, Richard. Just passing by behind us now was the M47, which is kicking off our Cold War display. So we're going to hand right over to the arena.
Europe is cut in two. Germany is split down almost the middle. The inner German border is formed, and two massive power blocks. In the west, NATO. In the east, the Warsaw Pact come to dominate the next few decades. Now, tank development in the period goes a long way. It's been said already today that the tank comes of age during World War II, but it goes even further during the Cold War. Now, the quest here is for something called the universal tank. In World War II, we have tanks, light tanks, medium tanks, heavies. What we need is a tank on the battlefield that will do all the necessary jobs. That is the universal tank, and that morphs into some of the vehicles you're seeing behind me, main battle tanks, and they're the things that are still with us today. Now, the first three vehicles leading that display are from ex-US Army, the M47 Patton, the M60, and that big beast, third in the queue, that is the M103 heavy tank. The next row of vehicles, there is a Polish-made Soviet-designed tank, T-72M. There's then a West German Leopard 1, a British Warrior. It's not a tank, it's an armoured fighting vehicle. And then the last is Challenger 1, which is a British main battle tank that was with us in service until fairly recently. Now, what's happened in this period is tanks have got bigger and more powerful. World War II, you're dealing with tanks that perhaps have a 350 horsepower engine, might weigh 30 tons. We're going up to a 1200 horsepower engine and a tank that, with all its extra armour, might weigh 70 plus tons. Gunnery is developing. We have more powerful tank guns. Rounds like the Hesh round, the APDS, laser rangefinders, image intensified sighting kit. Tanks are becoming more deadly. And also, the degree of protection these tanks have is improving. We start off with, like the tanks behind me now, cast steel armour. That's okay up to a point, but tank rounds become so deadly that it doesn't do the job anymore. So modern tanks, the shape is rather changed, and they now have composite armour. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but just moving off is the West German Leopard 1. This is the first tank that was designed and built for the Bundeswehr, the reformed German army after World War II. Prior to that, they'd been using American vehicles. This one was designed by Porsche, like quite a lot of World War II German tanks, and built by Krauss-Maffei. And it represents a German way of thinking about tanks and how they operate. You have to understand that there's something called the iron triangle, an equation that you need to apply to any tank to get it to do the job you want it to do. And what that is armour protection, firepower and mobility. It's a three-sided triangle. German tank designers decided that tank rounds were so powerful, it didn't matter how much armour they applied. It was really a question of making the tank light and fast. And the Leopard, just leaving the arena now, that's a tank that will do over 40 miles an hour, 45 miles an hour, and it probably weighs about 20 tons less than its equivalent, something like the British Chieftain. Now, the next tank moving off is an American tank from the 1950s. It is the M47. Now, the Americans like to confuse people, so they've actually got 3 tanks called Patton. The M46, the M47, and the M48. This is the M47, the one that came in the middle, so it's sometimes called the Patton 2. And it's a stopgap. What it is, they realised that the M46, the original Patton, wasn't really up to the job. It was, if we're going to be coming across heavy Soviet armour, it didn't have a good enough gun, and they needed something better. They were building a better tank, the T-24. That would become the M48, the 3rd Patton, but it wasn't ready yet. So it's a stopgap. They took the hull, the mechanicals, from the M46 and put the gun and the turret, those bits were ready, from the T-24 on top. So you've got a reasonable, it's a marriage really. It didn't last very long, it wasn't that successful, but it had great impact in other parts of the world. The US Army never really used it in combat. It is out of service within about 10 years, but it is supplied to a lot of other armies around the world. Most of NATO and SEATO. Probably most, I think this has been mentioned already, probably the most famous tank crewman in an M47, Arnie Schwarzenegger. He did his national service in one. And he has subsequently bought his tank, M47 331, and taken it home to California. Must be nice to have his money, mustn't it? So the M47, that one is beautifully restored by a gentleman called Matt Pyle. We have an M47, which we are hoping that Matt will do the same job on, actually do a restoration job on it. We are hoping our M47 will be running by TANKFEST next year. Now, another American tank. This is the M60, and this is a 2nd generation US Army main battle tank. It is bigger and tougher than the things that came before, and we've gone up from the M47, M48, they have a 90mm gun. This has a 105mm gun. That's quite a popular caliber in that period. But you always tell a tank is good when it hangs around. And this particular one, the M60, comes into service in 1959, and it is in service in the Yom Kippur War, supplied to the Israeli Defense Force. It's in service in Desert Storm. And there are plenty of armies around the world, Allied armies, that are still using the M60. This particular example was US Army. It served in Germany, and that's a fairly typical camouflage scheme of that period from the European theatre of operations. Peculiar characteristic to it is that cupola on top, an enclosed cupola for the commander with a machine gun mount. I'm not sure I like that idea. One of the things about tanks is you need to be able to hide the thing and get hull down. That actually adds height. Moving off now is a heavy tank. This is the American M103. And that, I look at that and I think if a child drew a tank, that would be it. That is such an absolute classic tank shape. All cast steel armour. If you get over to the tank park and go and have a look at it a little bit later on, that turret is such a massive steel casting. It's incredibly impressive. It's got a 120mm gun. And this, again, is some of the paranoia about the sort of tanks that the Warsaw Pact would be filming. The sort of paranoia that gave us FD4005, Conqueror. It's designed to be a big tank with a big gun and a lot of punch. able to deal with Soviet heavy armour. In the end, it wasn't really necessary, because main battle tanks, something like the M60, can actually do everything that the M103 could do. So it became redundant quite quickly. It was only in service for about 10 years. And then it was made redundant. But it is a magnificent tank. It weighs about 65 tons, so it really is a heavy tank. And it has got a massive twin-turbo diesel engine. But even so, it's a plodder. That tank can only do about 23 miles an hour, and just about everything else you'll see today can do over 30. So the M103, it's a glorious thing to look at, but fairly short service life, fairly early redundancy. The age of the heavy tank was over, and main battle tanks would rule the earth. Now this vehicle, the little French AMX 13, is absolutely fascinating. French tank designers, quite idiosyncratic, but very, very good indeed at what they do. And this is a light tank. The 13-bit AMX 13, it only weighs 13 tons. It was intended to be air portable. The fact that at the time they hadn't got an aircraft that could lift 13 tons was neither here nor there. But it's an example of how to put a big gun in a very small tank. It's a light tank, but it's got a peculiar turret. The turret is an oscillating turret. When you look at it as it comes past, you'll see it's in two bits. You've got the actual turret base and the turret ring, and then the top half is mounted on trunnions, so it moves independently at the bottom. It has an auto loader, magazine, revolver type auto loader in the back. And it mounted a variety of guns. It starts off with a 75mm gun. Then they discover they can stick a 90 in there. And that little tank, that 13-ton tank, is fielding a 105mm gun. That is a super, super little bit of design. The turret is also used on other vehicles, on wheeled platforms. But as I said, French tank designers, quite idiosyncratic. But if you look at that little tank, that's a hell of a lot of bang for your buck. So far, we have had a rake of US armour. We have had that super little French tank, really like that, as you can probably tell. And now it's time to see some British armour. And this, coming on now, this is Challenger 1. And this is a proper main battle tank comes out in the late 70s, runs through into the 90s when it was replaced by Challenger 2. There are still variants in service. And this is a modern generation main battle tank. 70-odd tons of odd tons of composite armour. The armour, you'll see the shape has changed. It's not rounded anymore. Tanks these days are slab-sided. Composite armour is a complex sandwich of high-tech materials. Steels, depleted uranium perhaps, plastics, all sorts of stuff put together provides a lot better protection than basic steel armour. The gun is the L11 120mm gun. That is a very, very powerful piece of kit. The record for the longest tank-on-tank kill was achieved in First Gulf by the Royal Scots Dragoon Guard's Challenger 1 tank. It knocked out an Iraqi T-tank at a range of 5.2 kilometres using an APFS-DS round, a Finn round. That is a record that still stands. Very, very powerful gun indeed. The other vehicle that you can see on the far side of the arena, that's the other vital component of the armour equation. That's a Warrior, and it's what we call an IFV, infantry fighting vehicle. Now, tanks, infantry need to operate together. When you've got somebody lurking in a hedgerow who's going to whop one of your tanks with an anti-tank guided weapon, you need to get the dismounts, the infantry, on the ground to go and sort him out. We used to use basic armoured personnel carriers like the British FV-432, American M113, but that morphed into the IFV, Infantry Fighting Vehicle. The purpose of Warrior, in the back there are 7 dismounts, 7 infantries. You've got a crew of 3, but there is a turret with a 30mm Radin cannon and also a 7.62mm chain gun. So this doesn't just transport guys around the battlefield, it can actually mix it with the enemy, provide fire support. As I said, infantry and tanks need to operate together. One without the other is never even half successful. Now, just coming off the mound is a tank from what would have been the other side of the Iron Curtain. This is a Soviet design. This is the T-72M. You might notice as you come past, you've got little Polish flags on the side of the turret. That's because this particular tank was produced in Poland. The T-72M, the M bit, is really the export version that was supplied to client states, fellow members of the Warsaw Pact. T-72M, very typical T-tank. Long, low-slung, that almost wok-shaped turret, and a big gun, 125mm gun, very powerful tank gun. The reason he said though is they've cut the crew down. Normally in a main battle tank, 4 crew: driver, commander, gunner, loader. Get rid of the loader, everybody else sits down, you can make the tank lower. You can make it a more difficult target. T-72M has an auto loader, a carousel that holds the rounds, sits underneath the turret. Very much Warsaw Pact thinking here. They believed that they needed to make lighter, faster tanks. Not so much armour, we're back to the armour equation again, but a tank that was hard-hitting but fast. And the T-72, again, will do about 45 miles an hour. It's a very speedy tank. If you have a look at the one at the museum as well, there's one in the tank story hall, you'll see it's got a deep wading facility. There is a snorkel sticking up over the top, so this vehicle can actually wade rivers, bodies of water up to about 4.5 to 5 meters deep. T-72 is just going to carry out a little manoeuvre. She's actually going to back off off the arena, and we've got a banksman there to show her back. The problem, of course, with the thing I've just described, that loader carousel, the auto loader, is if that tank is hit from above by top attack munitions of some sort. I'm talking about Javelin or Endlaw here, as we saw in the early stages of the war in Ukraine. That will penetrate the turret, and it will detonate the rounds and the propellant in the auto-loader. That will blow the turret off. Western main battle tanks tend to be designed differently. If ours are hit, they're designed to vent outwards. So the integrity of the tank is maintained, and hopefully the crew survive if they're extremely lucky. With the T-72M, or T-72, we've seen a lot of those where their turret has been chucked 100 feet in the air with pretty ghastly results. Now we have three more vehicles, I can't count, just entering the arena. The first one is a super little vehicle. That is the Scimitar CVRT, Combat Vehicle Reconnaissance Track. She is followed by Bulldog, an armoured personnel carrier, the FV430. And third in the queue is the Singaporean manufactured Warthog, known as the Bronco over there, I believe, which is an all-terrain troop transport. Now going back to Scimitar, CVRT range, combat vehicle reconnaissance track, used for lots of different purposes. Scimitar, Samson, Samaritan, armoured ambulance, recovery vehicles. That platform was used for a variety of different purposes. They only weigh about 8 tons. Boy, they're quick. That on the road will do 50 to 60 miles an hour. Aluminium armour, and Scimitar has a turret with 30mm rod cannon and a 7.62mm chain gun. So she can look after herself, but the idea with something like Scimitar or Scorpion is not really to get shot at, or you can provide fast support for infantry. That essentially is a reconnaissance vehicle. It's as I mentioned earlier, go take a look, don't get shot at, report back. That's why 8 tons aluminium armour is sufficient for the job. The original engine was the same engine as you'd find in E-Type Jaguar. She's been upgraded, and that has been replaced by a Cummins diesel. The last two vehicles basically do the same job. The Bulldog is, I suppose, a descendant, a version of an armoured personnel carrier, FV432, that I remember from a long, long time ago, but massively up-armoured. See, there is explosive reactive armour on the sides, and the Bronco, just moving off there, has a powered trailer, generic cab, and the trailer is used for a variety of different purposes. That's a remarkably roomy little vehicle inside. It will actually seat up to 16 people. Now, please don't go away, because next you're going to see the real big beasts. We have the British Army display shortly about to happen.
And welcome back to TANKFEST Online 2024. And of course, that was the Cold War display. Any favourites there, Nick?
Well, I thought the M103, I mean, because it's massive, isn't it? It's massive. We don't get it out to run it very often, so it was fantastic to see it in action this year. What about yourself?
Well, I have to say the M1. I mean, it was just huge, isn't it? When you see it driving past there, it's just it's quite an ungainly-looking vehicle as well. But of course, if I'm being biased, it would have to be the Challenger 1.
Yeah. So we were talking about the vehicles you served in earlier, and of course, you know, we got the British Army display coming up next. And actually, I'd be quite interested to know what the difference was between a Challenger 1 and Challenger 2. I know you served in both.
Yeah, we did, and I have to say, I mean, there is a world of difference. Much like, obviously, there's going to be a vast amount of difference between 2 and 3. But that's a whole other story. Certainly when we got Challenger 1 to Challenger 2, for us as end users, was absolutely remarkable. And I think the biggest difference, you know, bar suspension improvements, the armour, of course, was thermal observation and gunnery sight for us. So what it meant was that, and this, I don't know whether this is a good or a bad thing for us, that you can now, this 24-hour capability. Now, we did have a thermal sighting system on Challenger 1, but I have to say, it wasn't particularly reliable. It used to break often, and it had to do a hell of a lot of servicing and maintenance on there as well. We've got this new system for Challenger 2. It was fantastic, really accurate, and as I said, it sort of changed the whole face of us as crewmen.
Yeah. Now, I was interested to hear you say earlier that you actually preferred serving on the Chieftain than the Challenger 1.
That was a private conversation. I think the reason being because, I mean, everybody's fully aware of obviously all the problems with Chieftain, but it was a vehicle that you loved from a user perspective, the fact that you could do so much yourself. And what I mean by that is, if there was a breakdown, because it was a semi-regular occurrence, you sort of knew how to overcome it. Don 10, which is like a wire which we use in the army, was always quite often utilised to hold up the fuel injection pump system, to hold it in place. We were very used to dealing with leaks. Pack lifts became a bit of a pack lift party, where you'd all get in there and start fixing it. So perhaps it was that side of it. But of course, it was fantastic to actually get a reliable vehicle at last.
And of course, we saw the Leopard 1 in that early display as well. Leopard 1 and Chieftain are pretty much chalk and cheese, aren't they? The Leopard 1 was, of course, developed by the Germans. Very different philosophy behind its development, really.
It was. I mean, you know, and everybody. I mean, and I, you know, there's no. Of course, I love British Armour because that's where I served. That's where I grew up. You know, but the Leopard, throughout its history, has been such an amazing vehicle. You know, the reliability has always been top of their priority list. It appears to me.
And it's pretty nippy as well.
It is nippy, and you know, it's a joy. I've been at a stage where I've now driven, you know, all Leopards at one stage or other, and I have to say, it is simple, it is efficient, and it drives really well.
Do you have any thoughts about the T72 that we saw earlier as well? I mean, it's been in the news quite a lot recently, but I know it's a vehicle that you would have been trained to take on.
It has, of course, and then, you know, in our time, it was AFV recognition. For us, it was every week it was updates. You had to do tests on AFV recognition. You had to be able to identify vehicles at certain ranges through thermal imagery as well. So just the silhouettes and the shapes of them as well. Yes, and of course, the T72, you know, was the pinnacle of what we were perhaps actually facing. I would never, forever in my life, forget, you know, the phrase V-shaped splash front.
So, just as a recap, just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's donated and shown their support for the Tank Museum during this stream. For those of you who are new to the stream, please drop us a donation on Super Thanks, or head to YouTube memberships or Patreon to make a donation, or you could go to the Tank Museum shop at tankmuseumshop.org and find yourself something tanky. Treat yourself. Why not?
And now, of course, at TANKFEST, it's always a joy, and we'll finish up today's show with the British Army. But before that, AJAX, new vehicle for the British Army. We mentioned a bit about Challenger 3. Not so much is known, of course, about Challenger 3, but fingers crossed.
Next year, maybe.
Next year, maybe, the way it's going. But, of course, AJAX is what everybody's talking about at the moment. And we are going to see AJAX running at TANKFEST for the very first time, certainly to the general public anyway. And to find a bit more about it, I actually caught up with the curator of the museum, Mr. David Willey. So here we are now on the vehicle park, and I've just caught up, of course, with the curator of the Tank Museum, Mr. David Willey, and we're in front of a new vehicle, David, AJAX. First time we're going to see it actually run at TANKFEST.
Yeah, we've had AJAX here before in the past, but as a static, and not only AJAX, we've got one of the sister vehicles or brother vehicles in the fleet, Ares. Now, those of you, if you followed this programme in the press, no two ways about it, the actual procurement, design, development phases has been pretty much a disaster, if we're honest, for the British Army. But we're at the point now where this family of vehicles, they're going through their testing. They're actually the first ones are starting to be with the trial units. I was up at the Household Cavalry last week and we were seeing them, they're starting to use them there. And the really interesting thing for me is, so we have our impression about the vehicle from its history and from the press, now talking to the soldiers that are starting to use the vehicle, we're getting a very different picture. And of course, working at a tank museum, we've got the histories here. We've had things like Churchill tank in World War II. The very first manual that went out with the first Churchills basically said, look, we know this is a disaster. Terribly sorry, chaps, we're getting it right, but we know you need it. And the Churchill goes on, of course, to then have a very, very impressive wartime career. So from our point of view, seeing that, it's going to be very interesting knowing or being able to watch how the attitude is going to, we hope, change towards this family of vehicles. And you can see it and you can deal with it here today, because if you listen to the soldiers that are working on the platforms, they really see the difference and the sea change of technology that a vehicle like this can bring from your generation.
From our generation, of course, yeah. And you say, I mean, the end user is obviously, I mean, in my experience in the army, obviously, we always felt, no, rightly or wrongly, that it wasn't, you weren't involved enough in that whole process.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping with AJAX that perhaps it was slightly different the way they went around it.
Yeah, it's been a problematic gestation, no two ways. Look online, you know, it's a parliamentary reports, the other things going that way. But the key one for me now is those end users, the guys, the soldiers, the young men and young women that are going to be using this, when they're telling you about what this new 40mm cannon can do, the way it can acquire targets, the sensors on this vehicle, whether they're acoustic sensors, they're picking up sounds, they can identify where a round's being fired, what that object might be that's making that noise. You've got defensive aid suites on here. Of course, we could talk a bit more about those, but then I'd have to kill you, because a lot of this, the cameras, what they're feeding into, and that future idea of how it's going to spread around to the other parts of the army, that's where this is a very impressive bit of kit.
And your personal opinion of it?
I just watch this space because, you know, the jury's been out, we're nearly there. This is going to be something that makes a big difference to the army in the future.
Brilliant. David, thank you so much for your time. I'm sure we'll catch up with you at another point, but have a great TANKFest.
So a new bit of kit for the army there, Richard. What do you make of it? Is that something you wish you'd be able to get your hands on?
Doesn't it look fantastic? Although it's not a tank, I'm afraid, Nick. So perhaps I would prefer a tank. But it is an incredible vehicle. When you're up close to it like that, again, you don't get the the perception until you are standing right next to it. The sheer scale of it, it is a huge vehicle.
Yeah. And we'll be seeing it in action very, very shortly, of course, along with the rest of the British Army's examples of their capability, which is something which we always like to close TANKFest on. And we are coming to the end of the third day of TANKFest 2024. It's been a fantastic year for us. But I'd like to know, what does TANKFest mean to World of Tanks?
Well, I just said, the opening intro there, it's the 13th year, which is quite incredible that we sponsored TANKFest. And I think for us, it just goes to prove that great partnership that can happen between our audience that love the virtual tanks, obviously the historians as well, but they love the virtual tanks, get that love and passion for the vehicles in game, and then the ability to come and see them here live at TANKFest, which is obviously fantastic as well. And also, of course, your audience. I mean, your audience come down here, they see the vehicles, and perhaps they'd like to try out the game. And I think for an awful lot of people, I mean, it's how I got hooked on World of Tanks, was the fact that, where else could you have a go in a TOG, or you just can't do it anywhere else, can you?
Well, here, if David gets his way.
If David gets his way, of course, yeah.
So TANKFest 2025 is weird saying 2025 actually, but TANKFest 2025 tickets, I can't even say it myself, are available now. It has been a long day. It's been a long weekend. They're available now from our website, tankmuseum.org. So if you'd like to come to the Tank Museum and experience this fantastic weather, because it's always great weather at TANKFest, isn't it? That's just the way it goes.
It is always great weather, but we were a bit worried today. We had a bit of rain this morning, and we were thinking there. So I suppose a question I'd like to ask for you, Nick, is, with this 21st year of TANKFest running, how it must be one heck of a job for you to up the ante year on year on year. I mean, when does the planning for all this start?
Well, the planning starts pretty much tomorrow, if I'm being honest. honest with you. And like you say, you know, it is difficult to try and up the ante. You know, always listen very carefully to the visitors' feedback, listen to the kind of things they want to see. I do think a TOG 2 is probably stretching a little bit, David, but, you know, I'll see what I can do. But we always manage to pull it off somehow. You know, there's always a collection of vehicles that we feel we can show which are a little bit difficult. We've been very fortunate this year, of course. We've got the FV 4005 project being completed in time for us to show that vehicle, and that's been fantastic. And no doubt that's brought a huge number of people here just to see that in particular. Hopefully next year we'll have the M47 having been brought back to life by Matthew Pyle and his team. So, you know, there are things that I can't possibly reveal, of course.
Exactly, it's always a bit of a hush-hush, and everybody appreciates that, of course. And I think with the 4005, now, of course, Joe is going to keep it for a while.
Yes.
His plan is to take it around a few shows, so you never know. Maybe you're lucky enough, one of your local shows, you will see that turning up.
That's right. Hopefully it might be back for Tiger Day as well. I'm almost certain it will be back again for TANKFEST next year as well. So if you want to get up close and see it run by you and shake the ground, TANKFEST 2025 is the place to see it.
Now, we've had a few questions as well, Nick, about Tiger One.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, as you've mentioned before, it's been going for a long time now. I think you're at the stage now where it's obviously driven a lot more miles in your care than it ever did in operational.
Yeah, absolutely.
Operational time. What's the concern and the worry about, obviously, the long-term upkeep of that vehicle?
Well, of course, and this isn't really my own, this is more Chris Van Schardenbo's area of expertise, but, you know, I listen very carefully to everything he says. And, you know, what happens, the reality is, whenever you drive a vehicle of any kind, you know, there's always wear and tear on the engine, on the mechanics, and so we always have to be very careful about how we're looking after that vehicle. And, you know, being very conscious of, you know, if you like, the wear and tear on it. So everything from the tracks, you know, the bearings, all of those sort of slightly minor parts, as well as the engine, of course, which is arguably the most important part of the engine, and the parts that make up the engine, mean that we're always looking very, very carefully at that vehicle. And it's very important to us that that vehicle, when it runs, is as original as possible, but also that we're not doing anything irresponsible with it. Because, you know, it's complete. It's currently the world's only running Tiger tank, and it's a really important part of our collection. And so, yeah, it's important that we balance our demands and needs to run it, because as you can see, it's fantastic for the audience seeing these running vehicles. I think there's no better way of learning about and understanding tanks than actually seeing them in action. But we also need to be, you know, reminding that we are a museum. Our job is to protect, conserve and care for these vehicles. And so, yeah, there is an interesting tension always there with those things.
With it. And something else which people ask a lot about, now obviously our audience passionate about tanks, the archives down here, and I think it's something which people sort of overlook, the fact that you have got the archives. You've got a very skilled team in the archives. I mean, we've used it in the past, certainly for World of Tanks, for a lot of information, a lot of blueprints, so it has helped dramatically in the development of some of the vehicles in game. But it's, you know, the access for the general public is okay.
Yeah.
They can go down there, they can sit there amongst it.
Absolutely, yes. You know, we regularly have people coming in researching through our archives. It's a vast archive. Obviously, its strength is in the technical history, particularly of British vehicles, and, you know, there isn't really much like it in the world.
And I have to say, your staff are so helpful, because anybody that's, you know, we've had many years of looking through archives, and you go to certain places and it literally is, you know, 1,000 boxes piled sky high, but they are so knowledgeable in there, it's incredible.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, they if there's something in there, they'll pretty much know how to find it. But I think, you know, the FV 4005 project, you know, showed just how valuable, if you like, having that access to the resort could be, because, you know, things like the spade at the back of the vehicle, for example, was remade using original drawings from our archive to make sure that that restoration project was as, you know, genuine as possible.
Brilliant, thank you so much, Nick. And we're now, they're just asking behind me, you can hear the roar in the distance. We're going to go to the last of our live arena shows and take a closer look at the British Army.
With AJAX, and now currently I'm the Trial Sergeant Major, so I get to see lots of different trials and development areas and give advice and assurance on that.
And without putting you on the spot, you've enjoyed your Army career?
Yes, it's been brilliant, and it's nice. This weekend has been lovely, speaking to people that are considering a military career in the future and thinking that maybe next time they're in Bovington, they're going to be in the accommodation and getting that enjoyment through a military career as well.
So, and I keep saying this, I know we've got lots of different families here, whatever. Do talk to the soldiers in uniform, because again, they'll be able to give you their first-hand experiences what it like is in the modern army, and obviously, and one of the things we're going to see with some of the vehicles in the moment, things are changing. Mark's next to me with a beard. It was only this year that the British Army soldiers been allowed to grow a beard.
Yes, so Easter it was announced, and it's been really good for morale for soldiers. You've seen a lot of smart beards, and it's really important to, whilst our appearance has changed, our standards remain the same.
That's why you're seeing so many. If you were wondering that, it's just been almost a competition. I think every soldier in the army's tried to grow a beard, haven't they, since Easter, pretty much. Anyway, on with the vehicles. So, what have we got here?
So what we've got here is the Jackal 2. It's crewed by members of Army Trials Unit, so it's got Staff Sergeant Piper from Queen's Royal Hussars and Corporal McLean from Royal Scots Dragoon Guards.
So Jackal's one of those UOR, or Urgent Operational Requirements vehicles, put out there for Iraq and Afghanistan. What was its key role for when it was first designed?
So it was designed to be able to support personnel in combat operations or conduct combat operations. But since Afghanistan, we've seen that this vehicle is capable in varying terrains and varying weather conditions.
And what we've got on there, obviously, open top, great visibility. Is that a weapons station in the middle? I can see something at the front as well.
Yeah, so at the front we've got a general purpose machine gun fitted next to the commander, but we've also got a weapon slew ring in the centre where we can have a 50 caliber heavy machine gun fitted, a 40mm grenade machine gun, or a general purpose machine gun 7.62mm.
And we've got here at Bovington, we've got another variant of this. We've seen the six-wheeler going around. That's kind of logistics support, is it? A similar sort of role?
Yes, indeed. So depending on the roles that it's going to use, it will depend on how many personnel they need to carry.
A very good visibility, as you can see there, fantastic off-road. They can change the tyre pressure and the way the suspension works depending on what surfaces you're going over. And one of the other things that looking at Jackal is how it can get somewhere with a force quickly. And that's another one of these things, mobility, very important these day and age. So another vehicle, not so familiar, I'm sure, for many people here. What's this fellow?
So this is a Foxhound. It's a light protected patrol vehicle. Again, it was identified as a need for operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it was to replace the Snatch vehicle.
And again, for those in the audience, you can see inside the museum vehicles like Saladin, Saracen, etc. Look at that V-shaped hull underneath, really distinctive. And the reason for that, we all know Afghanistan, Iraq, lots of IEDs, mines, roadside bombs, etc. The idea of that V-shaped hull, if it drives over some explosive device, the blast is vented up the sides. It's not captured underneath the vehicle, which can, of course, flip it over and do a lot of damage. So V-shaped hulls have been around a while, but that's one of those vehicles you can really see it on. What are we really doing with Foxhound? What are we using it now?
So this is a really effective vehicle for conducting mentoring roles or for combined operations. Capable of carrying up to 6 personnel, and as well as a V-shaped hull, it's got modular components there to allow it to be repaired in the field really quickly and get that back into the battlefield.
And I found out, I was asking earlier about this rather jazzy camouflage scheme. Apparently it's a potential urban camouflage scheme. And like many modern ones, it's actually stuck on. This is actually a vinyl wrap on the vehicle. It's been on there a while. It's got pretty glued on, I'm told, at the moment. But the idea being there, like a lot of camos now, what they're thinking of is a base colour, lots of sticky different components, depending on where you're going, what the operational terrain is going to be like. You stick certain types of patterns on there, and you can add more, add less. But this is a potential one put together by DSTL, Defence Scientific Technical Laboratories, something we might be looking at in the future. We've at the moment still got Berlin camouflage on some of our tanks and urban operation vehicles. Now, next vehicle, what's this fellow? We're not going to hear ourselves think, are we, as it goes by?
No, I'll wait a second. So this is a Challenger armoured repair and recovery vehicle, the CRAV. And what you can see on this platform is this is at its operational entry standard, meaning that there's additional components, and this is how it would be if it was to operate in operations or theatres.
And what do we use this for?
So this vehicle is used to recover armoured vehicles and armoured fighting vehicles, and it's invaluable. Wherever you see armour, you'll always see crafts providing that REME and mechanical support.
Now, we talked earlier on with the Centurion about the need for battlefield recovery, why you need it under armour. Has been mentioned there. You can see some of those holly bones, those bars I mentioned, towing things on the back of this craft. The crane as well, quite an impressive crane kit. And you've got a winch as well, I imagine, on there.
Yes, we do. So the crane can lift up to 6.5 tonnes. This means that even the engine, the power pack of the Challenger 2 can be lifted by that crane, allowing repair in the field. The winch as well is capable of a one-to-one tow, winching up to 50 tonnes, or if they require more weight, they can do a 2-to-1, and that can be up to 98 tonnes. The winch is that heavy, there's an auxiliary winch, and its main purpose is to lift that winch and get it to its area of operation.
Now, for theatre entry standard, this is now, you can see it's got all those extras it could have on it if it goes off to fight. So there's bar armour protecting that cage device around the rear to trap rocket-propelled grenades. You've got reactive armour on that zigzaggy stuff on the front, it looked like. So that's explosive armour to take the blast away. And of course on the back, these peculiar-looking little, what they sometimes call bird tables. It's got electronic countermeasures equipment on there, which of course are so necessary on the modern battlefield. So a cracking bit of kit, the craft, and again we'll see that a little bit later on. So what's this fellow? I always think this is like my Tonka toy, this one.
So this is very similar to the craft, but for wheeled vehicles. So this is the support vehicle recovery. So wherever you've got wheeled or B vehicles, you'll see these vehicles as well. Again, it's crewed by REME personnel to provide mechanical support to the battle group.
And this is part of that big manned family of vehicles, trucks, etc., that the British Army, we've got the contract on. And I guess there again, it's just making the obvious point, if you've got very similar bits of kit, when you're trained to operate that, it means you can maneuver or you can move over to other bits of kit without having to be completely retrained. So I imagine the cab's pretty similar in some of this area to a lot of the other manned fleet.
Yes, it is indeed. But what's really good about this is its versatility and what it can offer. So winching, we spoke about winching earlier. This has got winching capability as well. And on a 1-to-1 ratio, it can winch up to 25 tonne. On a 2-to-1, it can winch up to 50 tonnes. But at the front, there's an extra winch. This is to allow it to do self-recovery, meaning it can get into the most difficult terrain.
And we mentioned REME there, Royal Electrical Mechanical Engineers. They're the guys that do that battlefield recovery and, where possible, the repair.
Yes, and they support everywhere that you see the battle group. You will always have the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers to support and to provide repair and recovery where required.
Now, another amazing bit of kit coming on now. This is basically the armoured engineer variant of the Challenger family, isn't it?
Yes, it is indeed. So this is a Trojan, the armoured vehicle Royal Engineers. On there, the crew is Sergeant Ansell, Sergeant Godfrey and Sergeant Harris. Sergeant Harris has asked me to let the audience know that his godson Archie is here today and it's his 11th birthday.
So happy birthday, Archie, wherever you are at the moment.
So the role of this platform is to clear and create battlefield obstacles.
And to do that with Trojan, I always say it's a bit like a Swiss Army knife. Look at all those gadgets that it can potentially use. Mine plough at the front, the digger arm for manoeuvring obstacles from in front of it, and that whopping great bundle on the back, that's a fascine. first used by tanks back in 1917 at the Battle of Cambrai. You can drop that in a ditch or a guttering or a small river, and it means you can drive across it without having to have a whole bridge there as well. But lots of other bits of equipment that's going to be important on the battlefield on that vehicle.
Yes, so you've got the excavator. The excavator can extend reach and allow it to perform more precision tasks. You've said about the mine plough, but the mine plough can also be in two sizes, so it can clear to track length, or it can be extended to do more in-depth mine clearance. We can also
So it can also lay its own smoke screen. That's the idea there. So if you put diesel on a hot exhaust, that's what you get. Now, of course, at the moment, the wind's coming the right direction. It's not going in your faces. The great thing about that, of course, is that means you're hidden from the enemy on the battlefield. So that is a feature of all the Challenger family, very useful. So here we go, an old favourite, the Warrior.
Yes, indeed. It's been around for a long time, and it's still very versatile on the battlefield. The crew that we can see in there is Colour Sergeant Friend, Sergeant Nelson and Sergeant Johnson.
And the Warrior first put into service to go alongside really Challenger 1 as our IFV, or infantry fighting vehicle.
But as you can see there, the versatility it has. So you've seen the turret moving, and on there we've got the 30mm Radin cannon. We've also got the L94A1 coaxial machine gun. We call it the chain gun. Multi-barrel smoke grenade dischargers, but you can see the speed of this vehicle as well. For the infantry to be able to get into position and allow dismounted soldiers to dismount from there, it's a really effective piece of equipment.
And you always notice with Warrior, when it stops, it's got fantastic brakes, because it needs to get those soldiers to the part of the battlefield they're required, stop on a sixpence, they debust from the back, finish the attack on foot. They're protected by that Radin cannon. Now, you're a gunnery guy, that's still a potent bit of weapon, even though it's getting on in years.
Yes, it is indeed. It's potent, it's accurate, and its main selling point is the speed that this can operate with. And you'll see later on today how effective the Warrior is still.
Now, Warrior is going to be around in service for a few more years. It's going to ultimately be replaced as the infantry personnel carrier by a wheeled vehicle. That's going to be called Boxer, we hope. We've had a Boxer here once in the past. We hope to see one soon. So Boxer will take that role, but meanwhile it's actually got another role, hasn't it?
Yes, so what we've seen now is that the Warrior, whilst it's still predominantly used by armoured infantry, it's assisting other regiments where it's being given as a reconnaissance role as a short-term use.
So what have we got? Oh, another classic old favourite. This time in yet again a slightly different iteration. It won't have looked like this the last time you saw it. This, of course, is Challenger 2, and this particular one, they always, you guys like to call it, it's Megatron, isn't it?
Yes, so the Challenger 2 that you see here is at its operational entry standard. And the reason that we call it Megatron is this is at the Army Trials Unit. We're constantly doing trials and experimentation, and every year you'll see that there's new additions to the tank. Therefore, it's always transforming. So we aptly picked the Transformer name of Megatron for the Challenger 2.
So if you were here last year, it looked different. And the reason this one looks, the melted chocolate that looks all over it, that blanket, is something called Barracuda. It's a thermal blanket. So it suppresses this word we use nowadays, signatures, heat signature. If you look at this vehicle through thermal sights, you're going to see where the heated bits are. If you can suppress that signature, they might not think you're what you are, i.e. a tank and a target. So this is that Barracuda system that goes all over the vehicle. What's the other thing we can see on the top of this one?
So we've got the electronic countermeasures, which is what looks like a bird cage at the top. And also, for those that have seen Challenger 2 before, normally you'd see a general purpose machine gun. mounted. But on there, we've got the remote weapon station, the enforcer, which means that the loader can operate that whilst protected inside the loader's station. These additions are almost 12 ton, making this operational entry standard sit just under 75 ton. That's why we also have the operational entry standard CRAV at ATU, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to recover this with any vehicle.
Now again, those of you will know that we are at the moment in Britain, we're trialling Challenger 3, basically very good parts from Challenger 2, new guns, smoothbore 120 gun. With any luck, within a few years we'll be seeing that new Challenger 3 down here, at, not only at Bovington, but to be shown off here at the TANKFEST event. Point being though, that meanwhile Challenger 2 is still a very, very lethal bit of kit, isn't it?
It is, and when you look at Challenger 3, there's a lot of areas that have remained from Challenger 2, which shows how it still achieves its currency in the battlefield.
Now, very pleased today, we've got variants here of the very new family that's you've heard a lot about in the press, etc. This is Ares from the AJAX family. Now, let's be honest, it's had a very troubled gestation period. It's taken longer than expected. It's had lots of procurement issues. But the interesting thing, I mentioned earlier today about Churchill tanks, how when they first got to the troops, there was a manual saying, careful chaps, we know it's not quite right. Interesting, that had a great war service. Now, watch this space, because if you talk to the guys that are now trialling and serving on the first AJAX, we went up to the Household Cavalry the other day, some of the first units to be putting this through its paces. Listen to what they're saying about this vehicle, because it may start changing our minds. I'm a taxpayer too, we don't want to waste money, we don't want to see things going wrong, but this is really bringing a step change, isn't it, to how we're going to do reconnaissance in the future.
Yes, so we're looking at intelligence, surveillance, target acquisition and reconnaissance. And when we look at the modern battlefield, we need to use digitalized platforms to achieve that. The Ares and the AJAX that you see today, and we'll discuss later on what this brings with the I-Star capability.
So what you're looking at here is it's based on something called an ASCOD 2 platform. It's got a MTU engine in the back there. We're looking at that particular variant. We'll carry a section of infantry or specialised troops forward. But the key one about this is the great step change that, of course, you can't really see from the outside, is all the digital infrastructure and what that can achieve.
Yes, so we're using network to achieve this. So we've now got advanced systems that can detect, but we've also got ways to exploit this and get this sent back to the battle group swiftly and with more information. And these platforms provide this intelligence.
And this one is the kind of parent of the family, isn't it? This is AJAX itself with this brand new turret system and a brand new weapon system, 40mm caseless ammunition, I think, on this.
Yes, so we've got the 40mm cannon. I've been on ranges, I've seen this. It's accurate, it's lethal. But we've also got so many systems on the AJAX and the Ares that create this network-enabled environment. We've got an enhanced primary sight. This primary sight, instead of being used for engagement, is used for target acquisition, and it's so effective, and we'll talk about this later on when it's going through some reconnaissance serials.
Now, we can't obviously reveal everything. That's one of the reasons it's not allowed in the back of this thing, but some of this material, some of these sensors are still there. You've got cameras all around the vehicle. You've got acoustic sensors. They can pick up noise and work out where it's coming from, what it is, what that threat. And the issue about being networked with the other vehicle fleet, with Apache helicopters, with Boxers, with Challenger 3, etc. in the future, it means then the right weapon system can be selected for taking out the right type of target on the battlefield. So you're being more efficient, as it were, in the fight. And obviously you can see there all these bells and whistles on this. the real point here is, even though we still probably do need soldiers with a pair of binoculars, but this is so different how reconnaissance is going to be done in the future than the old days where maybe the CBRT guy, one radio, set of binoculars, and let's hope for the best.
Absolutely. So what this gives is enhanced situational awareness at all levels. Firstly, the situational awareness provided to the crews in all crew stations. So from the driver to the commander, some systems on there will let that crew know exactly what's going on and what's around them. But the other situational awareness is what we can provide to the battle group and to the call signs that you're operating with. And this doesn't just need to be through feedback, but through imagery that can be provided.
And on itself as well, that 40mm, again, you can see they've been releasing some of the footage of firing trials. We'll be doing one of our tank chats soon on where AJAX has got to. So have a look at that, because again, it'll be a watch this space. We'll be hopefully seeing the rest of the AJAX family in the future, visiting TANKFEST, because it's not just these two we've seen. You've got Apollo, Ares, you've got other members of this kind of medium weight family, recovery variants and other things that are going to come.
Yes, so earlier as you saw the Craft, you saw the Trojan, there's variants. So you've got the ES variant, so to provide support, you've got an engineering variant, and then you've got a command variant for increased network capabilities.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, that's just a quick run through of some of the kit, so you've got a little bit more knowledge. What we're going to do now for you is hand over to the Army, and they're going to show you a stylised, I use that word carefully, stylised battle. It's in our arena. Don't forget, our arena is, what is it, a couple of 100 yards long. Actually, in reality, we're talking 2-3 kilometres. So keep your imagination going on this, but they're going to take us through how some of this kit might be used in a combat situation. And I'll hand back to Mark, and we'll get going on the battle scenario.
Hello, Foxtrot 1-1, this is 0. J2 indicates possible sighting of BRDM and potential dug-in infantry to your south. Move now with Foxtrot 1-1 to confirm, over.
Foxtrot 1-1 Alpha, moving now, out.
So the battle group tactical objectives are to find, fix, strike and exploit. And what you're going to see is a battle group formation from the Land Warfare Centre conducting these tactical objectives. The first phase, the find, you're going to see reconnaissance platforms, the AJAX and the Ares conducting reconnaissance in the area. These would be 5 kilometres beyond other troops. So as you see the Ares coming towards you, if you look on the top, the movement, that is the Kongsberg Protector 153 self-defense weapon. This is capable of firing on the move with enhanced sighting systems and can have the 50 caliber HMG, the 40mm GMG, or the general purpose machine gun fitted there.
This is Foxtrot 1-1 Alpha, sighting over.
0, send over.
One times BRDM and dug-in infantry static near junction. Anti-tank minefield between my call sign and the enemy located at grid. Sierra Yankee 82978826. I am at grid Sierra Yankee 83058831 as at 16:16 hours. I'm observing, over.
Roger. Hello, Foxtrot 11 Alpha, this is 0. Tango 32 Delta and India 22 Charlie are moving to your location now. Over.
The reconnaissance call signs have now let the battle group know that they've sighted potential obstacles to impede movement. The battle group have now determined that in order for them to progress forward, they need to ensure that the anti-tank targets are eliminated. Otherwise, the armoured vehicles could become battlefield casualties. So we've now got the Challenger 2 and the Warrior getting into position to provide mutual support. The enhanced sighting systems and the lethality of the cannons means that dismounted infantry can operate with armoured protection to ensure that they are protected from depth positions and an armoured screen.
Hello, 0, this is India 22 Charlie. Contact, wait out. Hello, 0, this is India 22 Charlie. Contact 1 times BRDM and dismounted infantry. Engaging with main armament. Dismounted assault. Enemy located at grid 8297-8826. I am at grid Sierra Yankee 8305-8831. AJAX 1619 hours. Engaging now. Over. 0, roger out.
So what you can see there is whilst the dismounted infantry are moving forward, they're ensuring that a rate of fire is maintained whilst they move. This is to ensure that the enemy remains suppressed.
This is India 61 Charlie. Contact dismounted infantry with anti-tank. Position clear and consolidating for in-depth positions. Over. Zero, this is India 22 Charlie. Contact, wait out. India 6 Alpha, contact infantry depth, withdrawing back to India 22 Charlie, over. 0, roger.
Okay, so what you're now seeing is you're seeing the dismounted infantry soldiers withdrawing back to the Warrior. However, as they advance, when they withdraw, they also ensure that a rate of fire is maintained in the direction of enemy threat whilst they withdraw. So the AJAX platform, whilst it's conducting its intelligence, surveillance, target acquisition and reconnaissance, it's using the primary site to use a feature known as wide area search assisted detection. This means that every time it rotates, it commits its picture to memory. Anything else it sees on its next rotation, it will inform the crew of points of interest to allow them to determine if that needs to be fed to the battle group.
Zero, India 22 Charlie, contact infantry in depth. My 6-1 call sign, broke contact, and enemy have withdrawn south. And continue to observe, over. Zero, roger.
You'll now see the Warrior withdraw into a more safe location, ready to conduct its next phase of operations.
Hello, Echo 11 Foxtrot, this is Zero. Move now to clear safe lane across minefield at grid Sierra Yankee 82978826. Over.
Echo 11 Foxtrot, roger, out.
We mentioned earlier that the Trojans' role was to create or clear battlefield obstacles, and the Trojan has now been called forward to clear a minefield. The armoured fighting vehicles will remain in position to provide mutual support to ensure that our battle-winning assets do not become battlefield casualties.
Hello, Zero, this is Echo 11 Foxtrot, reaching now, out. Hello, Zero, this is Echo 11 Foxtrot, safe lane clear, over. Zero, roger up.
So we're now seeing the armoured fighting vehicles moving into the forming up point. This is a position of low ground concealed by high ground to mean that they gain the momentum on tactical movement.
All call signs, this is Zero Alpha. H hour in 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go, 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 go.
So H hour is to control movement from the FUP, where the reconnaissance will be the eyes and ears and get the assaulting troops to engage the armoured fighting vehicles that have been identified in front of them.
this is Tango 32 Delta. Contact 1 T72 at Grit, Sierra Yankee 8297-8826. Engaged and destroyed. I'm crossing the breach now, over.
At 0, roger. Foxtrot 11 Alpha, follow on Tango call signs and re-establish the screen.
Foxtrot 11 Alpha, roger, out.
We're now going to see the armoured fighting vehicles push forward and get into positions where there's mutually locked arcs in the direction of enemy threat. This is known as a ring of steel, and it provides protection as our rear echelon advance forward.
This is Foxtrot 11 Alpha. Screen out to the south established. No enemy seen or detected. Far bank secure. Over.
At 0, roger out to you. All call signs continue. Advance to contact south. Out.
So what you would see now is all of the AFVs shake out into their original position. However, you're now going to see a couple of laps of showboating and some waving from the armoured fighting vehicles. Military, we'd just like to say a huge thank you to the public this weekend for their support and engagement, and wish you all a safe journey home.
A massive thank you there to the British Army, and incredible to see Ajax doing a few laps there. And that brings us to the end of TANKFest 2024. From me, I would just like to say, of course, a massive thank you to both David, Nick, the museum, the staff, everybody who's made this possible. And of course, most of all, I'd just like to say thank you to you for watching and supporting.
Absolutely. Thank you, Richard. It's always great to host you and David here, and hopefully we'll see you again next year for TANKFest 2025, for which tickets are available now. But of course, I would love to thank the audience. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you for your support, not just today, but in the weeks and months ahead of TANKFest. We always really appreciate it. And of course, the staff and volunteers who make TANKFest possible.
And yeah, I know we've said it already, but thank you to the audience, thank you to the crew, thank you to you, Nick, and the staff supporting us and being amazing. Thank you to Richard for hosting, and we hope to catch you next time on this channel.